order of March 12th, 2019. It is 7:03, and we are going to hear budget presentation from the police department.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and Deputy Chief Paul O'Brien, and to the residents of East Bridgewater. This is my third budget presentation since I took over, and I wanted to keep consistent with my prior years. Is put together a presentation for you. I've got a PowerPoint. We'll go through the slides if it is works for the chair and your committee, because I really feel like I don't want to throw out numbers. Just like I've done in prior years, I want you to know, and the community know, what's going on in the police department, what improvements we made, what our goals are, my strategic plan, our strategic plan, where we're looking to go. So I'll go through this quickly, but I also don't want to miss anything because I think it's important for the community and yourselves to know.
Totally agree.
So if we can jump right into my first slide, and it's on two sides for you. Just to give you an idea, when I took over, I did 3- and 4-year look-backs of all of our line items. And what I found was that, through prior administrations, some line items had stayed, stale for multiple years. So what I did is I used those 3- and 4-year look-backs in year 1 and year 2 to come up with true numbers. And now I'm into my third budget, so I've got a better flavor and understanding for what we're really expending our funds on. And we've broken down a lot of our categories into subcategories. So within the overtime, we can break it down into what type of overtime. Is it a transport to the hospital, or is it an arrest, or is it a motor vehicle accident? So we're doing all types of things in that nature. And you can see
your productivity too.
Yeah, and it really does help us assess where our needs are and shows the gaps. As you see here, we've been pretty flat for the last 3 years. Over the past 7 years, our average increase in spent funds is about 3%. But we had 2 years early on when we came out of our wage freeze in 2011 and 12, where we spiked about 7% and 5%. And then 2 out of these last 3 years, we've actually, we did a 2%, but we came in at 1.24, and then we actually came in at around a 1% increase in 2016. So, this last year we were about 3%, and as I get into my budget in a little bit, you'll see, a 2% for us is more than 2% across the board, and I'll explain that in more detail. Some of our goals, and I'll just hit through these real quick. The deputy chief is now, he's into his second year now, and I can tell you it was a position that both my predecessors had pushed for, Chief Silver and Chief Cowan, and thankfully we were able to get that position in here. I can't tell you that, we can't operate without that second in command. And again, it comes down to enhanced command structure, supervision, and now more than anything else in law enforcement, we're under the microscope where we need to be doing a more efficient, job, reducing, public safety, officer safety, and then reducing our exposure to liability, because that's a significant issue for us. And Paul's just done an outstanding job. Last year, we did net a new position, although, as you see in my presentation, we still haven't yielded that net, because we've actually had one officer transfer out. We were able to replace that officer, but now that officer's in the police academy. Over the entire fiscal year, I've had one officer in the police academy. Well, it was one officer for 6 months now. It's this newest officer who I won't yield on the street until September. And then I've had one officer that's been out since the start of our fiscal year, on approved off time. So that's been a struggle. So even though I'm at 21 full-time police officers, I'm operating at 19 right now. And that's been a problem over the years. We've made a huge commitment in collaboration with the school. I don't want to go through the entire, but the Alice model, we've really taken on security, our children's safety, our public safety, and we've expanded it to not only the school with the Alice model, but now we're actually doing training for our public. We've done town hall, we've done the COA, we've done the library. Dispatching we'll talk about as well. We have had 3 full-time dispatchers for the last 10 to 12 years. We've had dispatching since Chief Silver took over. He implemented it in the first late 90s, early 2000s, and we've been able to expand it through some state grant funding. Again, it's dependent on grant funding, and I'm going to talk about in a little bit about what our plan is with the fire department. We now, through a grant, we have a shared mental health clinician. We share it with the 3 Bridgewaters, with the 3 Bridgewaters, Whitman and Middleborough, and I can tell you, we need a full-time clinician in town. You will see on my stats, we had 350 mental health calls for service, almost one every day. I can tell you today, we've had 2 calls that we're responding to, where both of them are people that are, a danger to themselves, and we've been dealing with that since about 2 o'clock this afternoon.
So do you call them from like when you get a call and you think that there's a mental health issue, does the person come wherever they are, I guess?
So she has an office day of the week in each department, so ours is Wednesday, but she's on call. So if tonight they're on the phone with her, walking through things, she'll triage. If she needs to respond, she will. In the first 3 months of her working for us collectively, she's got over 100 cases. I can't tell you, as much as the opioid crisis has been our number one, it's opioids, mental health, and I'm going to talk about domestic violence, and there's so much crossover that, we've really had to change our approach, and I'll talk about that. One thing that we talked about, we've been looking at regional dispatching. I can tell you, quickly, before I get into my presentation, that regional dispatching is not a savings to the municipality that needs to farm it out to another location, because we still need 24/7 police coverage down, 24/7 coverage. What we've found in working with Chief Herron is by combining and consolidating police and fire, we're already answering about 85% of the fire department's calls on 911. But what we're doing, and I'll get into a little bit later, is we're sending calls down there, we're going through the call again, and then dispatching. With our plan here to consolidate it, everything we warehouse at the police department, and then we'll be dispatching them right from the
So
dispatcher.
it won't be almost like a double,
We reduce the
Yeah.
redundancy, the time,
So that's
and
a
now we
big
get them on
productivity
the street
savings.
quicker. I'm big on data, and again, I hit on a couple things, in 2015, President Obama, they spent millions of dollars on the 21st Century Policing Report, and the biggest takeaway for me, amongst other things, was, strongly suggesting the use of technology to improve how police do our jobs. The days of police just going out there answering a call and, hey, we're gonna lock you up, put you in jail, or, we're gonna refer you somewhere, those days are over. We are social workers 101. Behavioral specialists, whether we like it or not, whether we think it or not, we are. And we're at the front lines, and we've really had to change how we police, and I'm utilizing every bit of data and technology as we can. I am trying to go paperless, even though I have a presentation on paper.
next year we'll move to the PowerPoint.
It is our goal.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go through all the initiatives, but just so you know, on the next page, we have detectives assigned to a high, a special state police task force that's doing high-priority opioid task force cases in this region. Many of these cases that you hear about, maybe seen the Enterprise, Brockton Base, they involve the suburban towns, and I can tell you from my, almost 20 years of experience as a drug investigator, we have to work collaboratively, and we have one detective assigned to that. We also have maintained what I helped start back in 1999, our web task force, the local drug task force. They work together collectively. That is still one of our number one problems. Regionalization and sharing resources is just a priority in our department. And we do it on not only our drug investigations, we have a Southeast Mass Law Enforcement Council, the 28 chiefs in Plymouth County with our Bristol County and Norfolk County partners. We collaborate across the board. SWAT, Mobile Command, anything and everything that we're doing, we collaborate, because alone, we don't have the resources to do it by ourselves. The jail diversion, we have that clinician. I'll talk about some of our school initiatives, domestic violence, and, commercial sexual exploitation of children. That is happening here and everywhere, and it's certainly a priority of our district attorney. I've been contributing to the task force that's putting together policy that we're implementing across the county. Our community policing, if you haven't seen us, we're big on social media, Coffee with the Cops. We've got the Fist Bump Fridays, Mondays, Tuesdays. We know that we need our officers to get out there in the public, because most of the times when you call the police, it's for a negative situation. It's not usually a positive request to have the police respond to your house. So what we're doing is we're trying to take that proactive, positive approach, and I think we've been very diligent and vigilant in doing that. So we're engaging in as many community policing events as we can, interacting. We just spent a day down at the seniors community center helping get our senior citizens registered with the Code Red system, the emergency notification system. It's something that we've been trying to, just get out there and talk about different things. We have child safety seat. You can see all the different things we're doing, touch of trucks. We've created our own bike rodeo that we started at the Y, but now Cecilia Cacciatore is doing it at the school. We just got a $5,000 grant to expand that. So we've got a big commitment to the community, and I just want to continue, and we will continue that. Grant money, if you're not familiar, East Bridgewater, we are the lead for our county-wide initiative on substance use disorder initiatives, but it's also exchanging or interacting with mental health. We're putting in for another grant proposal to expand that from substance use to behavioral health, because we had 350 mental health calls for service last year. We had 30 overdoses, 4 fatalities, and about 30 at-risk people who sought help from us, which is a positive. But that's about 60 total substance use-related calls versus 350. And many of those had that crossover dual diagnosis. So that is absolutely a priority in this department, and it needs to be, because it's really our number one and 1A problem. 1A and 1 being domestic violence, mental health, and substance use, and a lot of it all comes together. Some of the other grants that we've continued to get and get, Bulletproof Vest, Child Safety Seat, Traffic Enforcement, Bike Safety, 911 training. One of the key ones that we did together with the school district, Superintendent Legault and John Shea and myself and Deputy Chief, we put in for a public safety grant that we could have used just for the police department, but it also allowed to enhance school safety. So what we did is we utilized it to enhance the school safety. The middle school has struggled for years for their security system. I proudly say now, after the last week of the vendor installing the cameras, all 52 cameras are now on this new server that's warehoused at the middle school, and we've actually put our cameras here in the police station town hall on that server. They all connect directly back to our monitoring station in the police department. So in real time, if a critical incident happens, we can see the middle school, central school, which we need some improvements, middle school, and then town hall, and then the exteriors of those buildings. You know, the goal has always been to expand that across the town. Anyone that has these security systems that would allow us to, we could pull them up in real time. They're doing it in the cities. It's something that we want to build upon. But, you know, the middle school has been a struggle for years, and this grant, you know, was able to, for just under $20,000, was able to, you know, do multiple, improvements. And we talk about training. I talk about it all the time. You know, if you look at management books and courses, what do they say in law enforcement? You know, we have this high exposure to liability. How do you reduce that exposure? You know, training. You know, how do you keep officers safe? Training. How do you keep the public safe? Training. And, you know, our training budget for years, you know, had really, you know, been low. And, you know, we've increased it, and a lot of what we're doing is trying to think outside the box. I spent a short amount of money this year to do an online training account. So now, instead of sending officers one at a time to different places, we do the online training, webinars, tests, exams, and we just actually, we're talking, one of the ones that we're working on is, you know, engaging with, minority communities as well as hate crimes. That's a big issue right now across the state and the country. And, you know, so one of the things we can do is we can push it out to the officers. They can have 15 days, 20 days to go through it, and I don't have to send them somewhere. We can get all the officers done within a short period of time on shift. So that's the type of stuff that we're doing. We're trying to minimize and mitigate the overtime because it's just, it's not sustainable. Again, all the other trainings we can see, drug interdiction, investigations, accreditation, which is a goal. I want to get this department accredited, which is a main objective with the deputy chief. Unfortunately, we've been spending so much time on just reorganizing the department now that at some point soon, he'll have time to go full bore into the accreditation, but we still have a lot of changes that we need to make, and a lot of it's from the state, from the federal, a lot of mandates that are not funded that we have to comply with. He's just spent the last 2 weeks doing internal audit of our evidence and property. We need to do that. That's a critically important issue, so that, you know, having a deputy chief that can coordinate and lead that, and not, you know, having to rely on, you know, a sergeant here, a patrolman there, you know, that's again, a key reason for that position. Training, we talked about security, safety, ALICE, field training, et cetera. I'll get into it real quickly because I know I talk a lot here. You know, over the last 10 years, 2007 to 2017, our calls for service went up 42%. That's a 10-year period. Over the last year, we saw an additional 43% increase in our calls for service. Now, there's a good chunk of that's attributed to now we're on the same dispatch and record system as the fire department. It's basically what I say step one to that consolidation. So now we see all the fire calls, they appear in our log, so that's part of the increase. So now we see some of the same calls in the additional calls from the fire department. That actually allows us now to use the same record system, so that we go to this combined dispatching as our plan. We'll be using the same reporting, the same software, the same dispatching. We can track time off. Everything is consistent across the board. But in addition to that, we're tracking our walk-ins to the police station. Over 2,500 people walk into the police station seeking services. That's why if we regionalize, I can't say, hey, we don't need anyone in the police station, just put a phone in there. We've got 2,500 people coming into the police station that we can track, and that doesn't include probably another 500 to 1,000 that just come in looking for directions. Hey, can I talk to you? Something that we typically wouldn't track. So that was an eye-opener for me when we started doing that, because that was a new implementation from the deputy chief. Let's track the walk-in traffic and see what it is. Our public records request, and you'll see a slide down there, that's a new mandate 2017. We average 3 of those a day. Some of those I have to send to town council. We've got to spend time and hours processing those, and we have a time limit restriction on those. Again, substance use, behavioral health, mental health, all of those things, our Kid in Need program, which I'll hit on with the school, those are another reason for the spike in calls. And in my next slide with staffing, you'll see, this goes from 2004 to 2019, 15-year time period. Right now, we have myself, the deputy chief, 5 sergeants, 16 patrol officers, 3 full-time dispatchers, an admin assistant, Gene Bennett, who's been here forever, and 3 part-time dispatchers that are grant funded. In 2004, we had 2 more officers than we do today now. And this is with our call volume increasing about 50% probably from 2004 to 2019. So we're doing almost double the workload with 2 less officers than we had 15 years ago. We're multitasking beyond multitasking. You know, thankfully, and with your support last year, the Finance Committee support, we were able to get that net 1 person, because we had, as you can see there, we dropped down 2010, 11, 12, and for those that remember, we did the police department actually was the first one to sign on to the wage freeze in 2011 and 12, because we were in some real, problems, as a community, as a town. And again, I've been running shorthanded 2 years, 2 officers this full fiscal year, so that's been a challenge. You can see the department, 9 officers hired since July 2015, average age 30 years old with 1.6 years experience. So now supervision more than any other time in our history of this department is critically important. You know, I hear all the time, well, geez, could you just do away with a couple of sergeants? When you have officers 9 of them that have 1.5 years combined experience, and they need guidance, mentoring more than any other time, and as I said, than now. And again, the average age, it's young. Department-wide, it's 40 years old with 10.5 years experience. So, and that's department-wide, so we're definitely going through one of those transition periods. Our mental health calls for service, you can see, and we've actually now we've used our opioid outreach initiative, and we've now created a behavioral health. So now we're doing post-overdose and post-behavioral health calls for service follow-ups with a clinician, a recovery coach, and we have a team of officers. Sergeant Patterson heads up the team, and we have 3 patrolmen that he supervises. They're doing that on the clock, on their shifts. If we have to have them go do work, I'll backfill their shifts, and that does incur some overtime costs. But it's so critically important. You can see our total mental health service calls in the last year went up 47%. A lot of it's because we're collecting better data now, and we're seeing calls that may have run under the radar. It might have said, oh, it was just a disturbance call. Well, that wasn't really a disturbance call. Now that we've trained our officers, that was really someone suffering from a behavioral health issue. So when you collect better data, you do see spikes in numbers, and I think this will level out a little bit, but it's still significant. 350 mental health calls for service last year. That's 1 a day. And as I said, I was talking a little bit early before we started, we've got 2 going on right now that they're collectively dealing with since we started at about 3:30, those 2 calls did. And they take up sometimes an entire shift. So if you've got to take an officer offline, now who's responding to the calls for service? Our overdoses, our model has expanded across the county, across the nation. We are actually, Norfolk County and Norfolk County, Essex County have now replicating our outreach model across the county. We have probably some of the best data in the country. We got a national award in October as the collective body of chiefs, the DA and the sheriff. We're going down to, the International Chiefs Conference in May to present on our data collection, Chief Buteri from Plymouth and I, and our data vendor partner. With all that good stuff that's going on, you can see our numbers are still steady. We still had 4 fatalities last year from opioids. Unacceptable. It's a challenge. Across the state last year, the early numbers showed, we're going in the right direction. As the numbers are coming in, and some numbers from 2016 still have not been put on the books because they're pending cases at the ME's office. When all's said and done after 2018, it wasn't a 10, 20% decrease in fatals. It was around 4 to 6%. And for us, we were level, which when you have 4, 1 throws at 20, can throw at 25%. So the smaller numbers, but 4 is unacceptable. It's still something that we're so passionate and, it's a priority. You can see what the biggest positive, the at-risk people, they self-identify either through mom or dad or they come into the station or call the station. Those have increased 88%. Wow. We had 32 people seek help before overdosing. So and I get asked, Chief, your program, is it really working? You're flat. Well, we're flat when everyone across the nation is going through the roof still. I have something in there. The National Epidemiology Academy, it's utilizing predictive models. This is currently, right, this is within the last month. They forecast national overdose deaths are likely to continue to rise over this next decade. So we are in for the challenge of our lifetime, and there's been no crisis bigger than this substance use and now behavioral health than at any time. This grant is going to help us on any given day down in the station. You know, we'll have a clinician, a recovery coach, two of our grant, coordinator and project working, and then working around the region together collectively. And we're going to continue to do that. The success story, when we did 107 attempted outreach visits in East Bridgewater, 77% of the time, we had a successful engagement. Across the county, it's probably one of the highest in our 28 or 27 municipalities. We're getting ready to put our end-of-the-year report, and that's something we're real proud of. And that's not a tribute to me. That's to Sergeant Patterson, Officer Cacciatore, Officer Pat O'Brien, and Officer Randall, and our team of recovery coaches. You know, they're doing God's work. They really are, and they're out there on the grassroots, you know, trying to engage people. And it really spawned from our work with EB Hope, our local nonprofit coalition. And again, I want to get through this, but you can see some stats. 61% of the time, people accepted services. That's a real telling time. You go knock on the door, sit down with them, and 6 out of 10% of the time, or 6 out of 10 times, they're going into treatment. So that's, again, a measure of success. Most of our people are still East Bridgewater residents. You can see in there, out of the 61 residents we engaged with last year, 9 of them had multiple engagements. People would say, oh, that's a failure, Chief. No, it's not. They're showing faith in our program that they'll sit back at the table. Hey, we know people that struggle with substance use are going to have regressions. They're going to have setbacks. We're there to pick them up when they have those and get them going the right direction. And that's something that, you know, we're continuing to build upon. Again, the EP Hope Drop-In Center, it's expanded. There's one down in Plymouth now. There's one in Wareham. And the county group, EB Hope, has expanded to a nonprofit called PCO Hope that we partner with through our county chiefs collaboration. And they have a recovery house in Plymouth that they're supporting, and they're looking to expand or build one in the Bridgewater area and morph the drop-in center into a full-time recovery center. So that's one of the things that we're working with to help them. I'm not going to bore you with all the things that we've done. You know, I sit on these different boards, and a lot of times people say, well, why are you involved with PARI or the Plymouth County Police Chiefs or South Mason Chat? Because I bring back to the table all these ideas that I'm getting from these organizations, and we share them as well. It's a reciprocal, you know, it's how you build your professional pedigree, but it's also how you bring ideas back to the community that's going to help our residents. School safety is a priority. We have a great collaboration with the superintendent's, you know, team down there. We meet monthly with our local coalition, with the DA's office. Out of this opioid, initiative, we created, and I had gotten it from a conference, we call it the Kid in Need program. So now when there is a police response to a home in East Bridgewater that children are either exposed to trauma or they're in a drug-endangered environment, we have a system where we can share information within all the privacy and legalities that we let the behavioral specialists know at the school and the admin team. It's a real small select group. Johnny Jones is a kid in need. And now the school, their professional team, they know at 6 in the morning, hey, we've got a couple kids coming in today that we need to do outreach with. Our clinician is working with their behavioral specialists on a couple of cases, high priority cases, where in years past, what we would have done as cops is said, hey, we don't know what to go to the hospital. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole idea with jail diversion, it should be jail hospital diversion. We want to keep people out of the emergency room and out of the jails that don't belong there, that belong with professionals in substance use and with the mental health. And we're really seeing that spawn. We're doing a ton of work between Cecilia Cacciatore and Talitha Connor, our school resource officers. They're engaged daily down there. Safety, they're creating actually a program for graduating seniors, females, to prepare them for, you know, what are some of the challenges or what are some of the risks out there as you're a young lady going out into the college and the professional world. You know, and Cecilia and Talitha have crafted some things there. You'll see our Kid in Need program. The numbers double from 17 to 18. Oh, Chief, your program must not be working, more people. No, what we're doing, because we've trained our officers and our school staff, we're identifying these kids that, quite honestly, we didn't identify as being at risk. Now we're doing such a more efficient job. We're letting the school know, hey, Johnny or Janie is not going to be on their A game because something's going on. And instead of the school, you know, utilizing discipline, now they've taken the same approach as us. We're not going to put a kid in jail if we can get him into treatment. It's the same idea, and the superintendent and, Dr. Williams has been, a key component to that collaboration with our SROs and then the team. That ALICE program was collaboration 101. Dr. Williams, Sergeant McLaughlin, Sergeant Flint, they did a co-leadership model of training to all the staff, and it really was over a year period. We met as a group, we talked about the different programs, we decided collectively what we're gonna adopt. We trained all the police officers, all the firefighters, all the staff, the administrators, the custodians, and now they've got real training, where over the past 20 years, we've done some, but handing a booklet to someone saying, hey, this is our model, that's not real training. We're doing scenario training. Now they're engaging the students into this training, and that's gonna expand over the next couple of years. Again, some of those commitments are a result of getting that net body that I got last fiscal year that I still haven't yielded. So I've committed Officer Cacciatore to the school on a part-time basis because we are running shorthanded, so at the right time, she can't be there full-time because I just don't have the funding for it. I mean, right now, and the superintendent I talked, I'm funding for my budget, the SRO position and this backup SRO position. So that's a struggle, but it's a commitment that we need to make, and, we've talked about how do we, collaborate on, those positions moving forward, and we've got some ideas and, again, moving forward. I'm not gonna bore you with the details, but, the training that we did at Compass Medical, down at the COA, the library, there's different names. Every company out there has created the same model. It's basically, in essence, the ALICE model, but you got ALERT, you got CRAZE, you got Run, Hide, and Fight. Run, Hide, and Fight is the free one that the Department of Homeland Security pushes. So that's the one we've kind of been using for our community. Because people are doing some great work, but there are also people that, capitalizing on these programs. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can, but getting that out there. The One Voice campaign, you might have heard about it, social media campaign through EB Hope. It's talking about safety the first month, vaping, which is a huge problem for us collectively across the board. We're working with the Board of Health. We've got a public hearing coming up on some new, bylaws or new regulations that the Board of Health is going to recommend because of vaping or as a result of some of the vaping. We're working with the school constantly on doing programs with our local coalition. It's a challenge. This month is actually bullying, healthy relationships, domestic violence, and sexual assault awareness. Those are key things that we need to, we need to get out into the community, because a lot of people that are struggling with these issues, there's the stigma, they're isolated, and we need to, make that, bring that awareness piece to the forefront. And again, substance use and mental health, that'll be in April, and we've been continuing to do that. I'm going to talk about domestic violence because it's something that we're so, it is at the forefront of one of our number one high priority calls for service. You can see last year from 17 to 18, we saw a 30% increase. Again, a lot of the training that we've brought over the past 18 months has increased some of our calls, because quite honestly, some of those calls that may have been domestic violence related weren't recorded as domestic violence incidents because we haven't had, that level of, coding and offenses. We've created these special codes. You can see that our restraining orders actually went down slightly, violations. You can see the domestic issues went up, but we're seeing a lot of homes that we have divorced parents that we're constantly going to. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily domestic violence abuse, but it's a domestic situation where these kids are, either witnessing, whether it's violence or yelling and screaming. Those are things that, now we're coding this as accurate as we can. And it's significant. And you can see our restraining orders. We served 60 restraining orders in 2017. That's more than one every day. That's more than one a week. And then this year it went up 4 more. So that's, we have, in addition, you'll see in the following slide, we've got 50 to 58, from 17 to 18, domestic violence arrests and/or criminal summonses for domestic-related situations. Again, it's a priority. Those calls are going up. We're seeing a lot of the crossover between domestic violence, substance use, and behavioral health with mental health. Another initiative we created is our firearms license unit. We've engaged the patrol officers to have more officers involved in different initiatives. A cost savings. We've got coverage around the clock, so if someone has to get a license carry and they can only come at 6 in the morning, I have an officer on the midnight shift that can process that. So we have Sergeant Grillo overseeing 3 patrolmen, just like Sergeant Patterson's overseeing 3 patrolmen on behavioral specialist unit. Again, the idea, cost savings, department savings, or trying to reel in those costs. You can see our court costs on the right side. When we make arrests, there could be 10, 12 court hearings for one case alone that lasts over 18 months, 2 years, sometimes 3 years. Superior court cases, there's a 2 to 3, 4-year backup. And every time we have to go to court, we're paying officers overtime, or we're backfilling shifts to send officers overtime. That's a cost that the deputy chief and our court officer, our prosecuting officer, A.J. Voisin, Alton Voisin, have done an outstanding job on mitigating it. We're actually doing really well this year, but one case alone could cost us potentially $10,000 when all's said and done, when you add up all the different court hearings and trials. Another cost savings, we had a great collaboration with the DPW, just like the school department and the fire department with collaborations. And when I took over, first thing I did, I met with John Haynes, his DPW mechanic, and now mechanics. Instead of us sending out our cruisers to different, local places and paying different rates at different locations, the DPW mechanic does all of our work. The cost savings has been in the thousands of dollars, probably tens of thousands of dollars when you look at it over the past almost 3 years now. Because now, instead of sending out our vehicles to have a vendor come in to do our oil changes, we buy oil collectively, we contribute to it with the DPW, the fire, and he does all the oil changes. When we need work done on our warranties and stuff, if it's something that can be done by a mechanic, he gets the parts, the DPW mechanic, he's already on the clock. He's doing the work on the clock. So again, it's a great collaboration with DPW Director Haynes and Mike Janess, who's the lead mechanic, has just been, huge. And really, it's a tribute to the deputy chief, who's really worked hard. We talk cruisers every year, and I get asked this question, Chief, we got so many cruisers, do you really need that many cruisers? Well, on the road, on any given shift, we can have anywhere from 3 to 5 marked cruisers on the road. Sometimes it could be 6 or even 7, depending if we're doing special enforcement on grants, on traffic, OUI enforcement. We have, in our mock patrol, you'll see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got 9 cruisers. One of them has 111,000 miles, and the other one has 116,000 miles. The average mock cruiser right now, to date, has 65,000 miles. The shelf life on a police mock cruiser is typically 100,000 miles. And again, most people, geez, I have a Camry that is on 250,000 miles. These cruisers run 16 hours a day, sometimes 24/7, and, they're all over town. Sometimes we're down to 2 cruisers on the road. If there's a motor vehicle accident, Oak and Franklin, 2 cruisers, and one of them might have been at the Brockton line, they've got to get over there in a cruiser, and it's just, we put 75 to 100 miles on per shift, Deputy Chief. That's a big impact. What I did with the capital committee, I came up with a 4-year cruiser replacement plan, and we've followed it to a T. I started at my first year. Last year was the 1 year in that 4-year plan that we needed. We went for a second cruiser. This year, I've asked capital for 1 cruiser in staying consistent with my cruiser, replacement plan. But our objective is to get that, it's 209 there, off the road. I mean, it's a 2011 Ford Expedition. The only officer using it is Officer Eldridge, our truck enforcement officer, and he's put, you can see, there's, about $7,000 into it. You can see our next oldest cruiser, 207, that's the school, we utilize that, the school resource officer. That way there, it doesn't do a lot of mileage. It's had 11,000, almost 12,000 maintenance costs to date. We had to replace the engine in it. Again, that was something we collaborated with the DPW, but these vehicles, they get a lot of use. It's not your, mom and pop, hey, just cruising out there. It's 24/7. The only 2 departments that are open 24/7, it's the police and fire. And we're constantly on the road out of, those 2 departments. You can see the deputy chief and I. We have 2013 unmarked cars. We buy used cars. I'm going to ride it until they tell me that it won't work anymore. I don't need a new vehicle. We don't need a new vehicle. The deputy chief oversees the detectives. He's constantly responding to calls for service like I am. If we have some major instance, we're both out there, or one of us is out there while one of us is, on the phone. But again, when I did it, I said, we're going to think about this. We're going to be efficient. We're going to be cost effective, and we can find some good used stuff out there that we're not putting the mileage on the road that the cruisers are. And then again, you can see our detective vehicles. We have 4, but keep in mind, one of those was a jointly purchased vehicle with the Webb Task Force years ago, and it's a surveillance vehicle, so I don't want to get into too much of logistics, but the other 2 are actually drug seizures. We took them from drug dealers. They are not very, they're not new vehicles. You can see 2001 and 2003, but they work. And,
But Scott, you're showing here 7 vehicles with over 100,000 miles on them.
Yeah,
7
I did break it
vehicles.
down. The Mark Patrol cruiser average is 65,000 mileage. The unmarked average is 133,000. The maintenance cost on the unmarked is about 4,000 on the average. The unmarked is pretty close, you know, so, and again, I think that's important for people to understand is, you know, and I've had it, chief, just go down to 4 cruisers, save all that money. Well, I can't have a day where we have a call and I tell a patrol officer, you're gonna have to take your personal vehicle. And and Paul and I, we did that 15 years ago. I can remember as a detective or even a patrolman in a pursuit, hey, jump in your car. I mean, we can't allow that. That's a violation of policy. But again, today, those things can't happen. So I highlight that because I don't know that it's well-known in the community that, you know, I hear it all the time, oh, the cops have all these cars, they don't need them. You know, we're using every bit of mileage out of each and every car, and we're really thinking outside the box on how we can be more cost-effective. The goal is to be able to rotate one of them out every month, but that's a struggle. You know, because if you have a shift, the day shift has 5 officers. One's going to court, one's at the school, 3 cars are on the road. Next thing you know, an officer comes in to do traffic enforcement, and that's a 6th car on the road. And again, those are the challenges that we're confronted with in the maintenance plan. Public records law, you can see, we average 3 of these a day, and some of them are intensive, where we have to consult with town council, we've got to get legal guidance. It's a game changer for us in law enforcement when the law took effect, because it's a mandated law we have to comply with, and no one gave us any funding to have a designated person, even part-time, to do it. The deputy chief oversees a sergeant who oversees the requests that come in through dispatch. But again, we have to have a check and balance because we have to comply with these, and there is a time frame. And it's a challenge. We've got the deputy chief's done an outstanding job. We've got a pretty good system down now. But again, it's another one of these mandates that we have to comply with. I've got 3 slides in here on regionalization and dispatching, and I'm just gonna hit on the key points. If you go to the 3rd page, it says, there's a couple pictures there. Right now, when we get a 911 call, it goes to the police station. We've had civilian dispatchers for over 15 years. They answer the phone, 911, is this an emergency? They go through the vetting process that we have a computer module screen where it actually tells you type of emergency, these are the questions you ask. Medical emergency, heart attack, armed robbery. So we have some real in-depth training that they go through and then they can follow. So once we determine that's a medical, we have to transfer it to the fire department as it stands now. They have a full-time firefighter answering that phone. We then we've streamlined the process, but still, to a degree, have to go over the call we just went over. And then the fire department deploys their resources. Our dispatcher then stays on the line and goes through what's called emergency medical dispatch. If it's a heart attack, they go through the checklist. If it's CPR, they actually walk the person through, and we've had some unbelievable work done by our dispatchers, saving people's lives. And, you know, do you know CPR? No. Put your left hand on the chest, right hand, we literally walk them through the Heimlich maneuver, you know, a child's choking. Those are the types of things that happen. But as you can see in that process, police transfer to fire. Fire has a full-time firefighter there. Oh, now we're dispatching the fire units. We're already sending a police cruiser, and then we're staying on the line. Redundancy, you know, the fire chief has to put a firefighter on the desk answering those calls when, in actuality, we're answering 80% of his calls, or 90% of his calls are 911 that we're transferring. We can keep them here in the police station with our professional dispatchers and then just dispatch the services they need. We can give them the information they need to vet it, and then they can determine what resources they need to go to the scene. But we can streamline that process. And it would save us on consolidation of bringing those services together. We're using the same record management and CAD system now for dispatch. We're using a lot of the same software programs for scheduling, and we can build off of that. The challenge is on the day shift, we only have 1 dispatcher, and the fire department has 1 in the station. On the call volume, we've collectively looked at it and said, we need 2 dispatchers to be able to handle the call volume of the days. The 4 to 12s and the midnights, even since the fire chief came and presented to you, we've really dug into those numbers, and we think that we don't need as many full-time dispatchers to add on to our existing infrastructure. The funding that the fire chief had talked to you about, we definitely need that to streamline this process, to get the training, because there's going to be a transition period. Because what we're going to have to do is we'll have to cross-train all the police dispatchers on fire calls, and then any new dispatchers are going to have to learn both. And we have a plan in place. We're hoping that with, you know, getting the, you know, being able to utilize the funding that the fire chief presented, and when I'm going to present my budget, that we can streamline this process and now have a professional civilian dispatching combined at the police station that's going to support both police and fire services. It's more efficient, it makes sense, and it eliminates a lot of redundancy, not only, on the resource piece, but financially as well. And then lastly, you'll see, and I know we've had a lot of talk about motor vehicle accidents. We now have some new software that we've actually implemented even in the last couple of months. We can track all of the hotspots that are out there. And as you look, you can see we responded last year to 477 accidents. That's combined either over $1,000 worth of damage or under $1,000 worth of damage. You can see the last 3 years, it's continually increased, 420, 459, 477. It is still a major problem for us. Our motor vehicle stops, enforcement doubled this year. A lot of that's attributed to the fact that we've got new officers that are out there, doing great work, but it's also because we've mandated. We've got to get out there and be vigilant because our accidents are increasing.
Yeah.
Distracted driving, texting and driving, all of those initiatives, those are struggles for us. So you can see there, as you see, the Route 18 corridor, for those that aren't familiar, that is our number one problem in town. Highland and 18, the center of town, and 18 and 106. It's state-funded, it's state-controlled. It is absolutely, those are our hotspots, and the numbers bear that out. Plymouth and Washington Street, we're working on a plan with the DPW. It's been a struggle for years, and it's something that we've, collectively engaged with the selectmen, and again, it comes down to, funding projects to change those. Plain and Belmont Street, the DPW came up with a great, smaller cost item initiative with some stop signs that flash that we've actually implemented, or he's implemented down at Plymouth and Washington, which has had a positive impact. But again, these are things we struggle with, and I bring it up only because, it's been such a, public talked about, piece that, you can see, they're going up every year, 30%, 33%, 35%, over the last 3 years. But there's not just one area in town. It's across the board, so we're really trying to take a real proactive approach. We're using this mapping with our traffic enforcement, so the sergeants have been tasked. Look at the hotspots, get officers out there. Central and Washington is really that has a set of lights, and that's still one of our top accident locations, and that has a set of lights. It goes Plymouth and Washington, after 18, it's Plymouth and Washington, and Central and Washington's right there with it, across the board. Pleasant, Summer and Belmont was definitely got a lot of high-impact ones, but we've got other spots in town, and we're working to be as vigilant as we can. But unfortunately, when you only have, and I've said this publicly, if there's only 2 or 3 officers on the road, if 2 of them are at a domestic violence call or an opioid call or a behavioral health call, the third officer has to just stay available for calls and can't just be dedicated to traffic enforcement. How we've supplemented some of it is with some of the grants that the Deputy Chief and Gene Bennett and Sergeant Patterson have filed. We've gotten various traffic enforcement grants that we still have, but those are small ticket items in the grand scheme of things. So I talked a lot. I hopefully talked fast. I feel it's important that you as a board have this information and the community, has, and then, my door and our door is always open to answer questions. So with that, any questions or anything for me right now on any of that in the budget, and the narrative of the presentation?
I just want to say thank you. It was really helpful to hear all of this. I think it's been a wealth of information, at least for me. I don't want to speak for Dan, but to be new, and Melanie, to be new on the committee and to be able to have you present this way and not just the budget, I think helps to better understand what your needs are and where the budget, how you come up with these numbers. So I just want to say thank you. It's been very helpful for me.
I agree.
I agree, definitely. Thank you.
My question is, and I assume the answer is yes, that you'll be publishing this on your website.
My
of course.
intention is just like last year, we'll publish it like we did last year. This will be my presentation to the selectmen. We might, obviously with time between there, I might have additions, as we go through the process, but, absolutely, because I think it's important for the public to have this information. So,
Sorry.
yep, no,
Just
no
one
worries.
question where I've been talking with the school committee and the schools, and I know that one of their big concerns right now is also the mental health and the behavioral health at the school. And I know you said you work a lot together. Is that anything that you foresee that there's any funding for anywhere that could help both of your?
Absolutely. Like, with our clinician right now, we're sharing with 5 other communities. Superintendent Legault and I have talked, Dr. Williams and I have talked. My goal would be to have one town clinician full-time. That would be able to be a co-responder, school, police. I mean, in the perfect world, you know, that's, you know, like our clinician, I've told her, I said, I wish I had the funding, we could just steal you from the other 4 towns. Don't let anyone else know that. And, because she's outstanding.
Right.
But like, there's a couple of cases right now that, you know, they're working together with their behavioral specialists, with their social work team down there. And it really, so the school setting is no different than the community setting. The 3 top problems are domestic violence. The kids aren't involved in it. They're the exposed to
They're
that
being
trauma.
impacted by it.
Mental health, some of them are suffering, and then some of them are suffering along with mom and dad or family members, siblings. And then substance use. They may have an issue, there are kids, but, you know, it's not a big number, but mostly they're exposed to that. So, you know, and that's why we talk regularly, we meet regularly. You know, we have this model now throughout the Brockton region, with the Brockton Coalition team, where we meet to discuss these initiatives. In the perfect world, I'm looking for a grant that, you know, we have a couple grants countywide that are gonna hopefully expand some of the mental health clinicians that we could share. I mean, in the perfect world, we'd have a couple that the 4 communities could share, both school and town side, as one.
What level clinician is the woman that you're working with?
She's an LICSW, and she's got 10 years in the field. She's got involvement on the criminal justice side and on the mental health side and the substance side. So she was, you know, it took us 9-12 months. Chief Damani, he's got to get credit because Bridgewater was the lead. We went through about 3 or 4 rounds of hirings. It was a struggle. I thought it would be a no-brainer. I'll put it out, this is a big field. It's a struggle. Even for our opioid initiatives, the field is not flooded with candidates that can just jump right in. And, you know, but that's what we need. We need that level of service full-time in East Bridgewater as a community. But again, that's, you know, another salary that, you know, we're getting, you know, we're doing it now, collaborating with our partners, but in the perfect world, we're gonna need to build off of that.
The need's only gonna go up.
Oh, no, the numbers are showing it,
Yeah.
you know, there's no question. And as I said, overdoses, they're forecasting to increase over the next decade. Mental health, again, I say it all the time when Chief Pateri and I talk in different, you know, places on our opioid initiative. Our mental health calls are 4 to 6 times the volume of the opioids. You know, and so as much attention, we need to give attention across the board, all 3 of those, and then every other, you know, a related, issue, initiative that comes with those. Any other questions? So I'll jump into, we were tasked, initially I put together 2 budgets, what I call a true 2-0 off of my FY19 budget, the existing budget, and then I put in a real needs, a true needs. As you'll see, in my true 2-0, contractual obligations alone off of my FY19 for FY20 increases my budget by 3.11%. So a 2.0 is, in reality, for me, a 3.11, and that's not increasing anywhere else other than personnel and services. When we do work in police, we have vacation time off. Unlike other places, we have to backfill those shifts. When we have investigations, we have to pay overtime. You know, our overtime costs, you know, as you can look at our additional comp, you know, cover court duty, cover vacation, cover sick, other overtime, overtime and investigation and other, you're talking $200,000 there combined. You know, and that's because we have to fill. When someone takes a shift off, we don't fill it just to fill the shift, but we get down to a minimum staffing, we have to backfill those shifts. And then it doesn't include when people are out sick or people out for extended period of times. So those shift fills have to be backfilled. In my true 2.0, I can't match the increases above in salaries with covering overtime. So if people are my officers make more money, their overtime rate goes up. In this true 2.0, I don't make any increases there. So that means, in reality, I'm gonna be increasing salaries. I'm not gonna be able to increase additional comp. And my expenses, as you see in what I initially proposed, I had to do all my cuts. A true 2.0 for my budget is a $62,000 cut. I've got to cut somewhere. I cut, as you can see in my true 2.0, I cut the expenses. It reduced it by $61,750. In reality, I can't go zeros across the board on training and education, you know, professional services, computers. My licensing alone for our records and CAD systems is $16,000. You know, in reality, I don't see that I can manage $62,000 cutting from that line item. What I've done since then is I did another 2.0, and it actually comes up to a 2.05, and you'll see it up there. I basically cut dispatches. I cut from civilian dispatching. And I'm conflicted on this because I just spent probably 45 minutes of your time talking about all the needs of the department, and one of the biggest highlights of this FY20 budget is consolidating and combining dispatching with the fire, yet I'm looking at having to make that cut in civilian dispatchers. You know, contractually, if I make any personnel cuts, I have to cut from the civilian dispatchers first. That's collective bargaining. That was implemented when we first implemented, dispatchers roughly 15 years ago. So, I'm in a quandary. So I'm gonna, those are my two, I have two 2.0s, if you will. Before I talk about my real needs, any questions, thoughts, feedback on those, two, or my true 2.0?
Obviously, I know you need more, but the 201 and the 205, you told us what you cut. Is it, and I'm just throwing this out there, is it better to cut that or another officer where you've done without an officer for a year?
Can't cut an officer. I have to cut civilian dispatchers first by collective bargaining.
Okay.
So I cannot, by the collective bargaining agreements, I have to cut from my civilian staff first before laying off officers.
Is the
Did you
idea that
fill,
an-
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, is the idea that an officer would pick up the duties
Yep.
as needed, so
So
that's.
traditionally, we've had 3 full-time dispatchers for the last decade. It was 2, and it started off with 1 and it built up to 2. The patrolman will cover the desk and will work the dispatch shifts and have for years. It used to always be, late 90s, it was always an officer. Then we implemented a full-time dispatcher, then a second, then a third. Over Chief Cowan, we had 3 full-timers for his entire, 10-year career. I've expanded it through some of this grant funding because at the end of the day, I don't want a full-time police officer in the station doing a civilian job. I need officers on the street. As I told you, we're down to 2 cars on the road.
Right.
Today, we had 2 patrol cars responding to calls for service. When you have 22,000 calls for service, there are departments that have a minimum. Our neighbors over in West Bridgewater, he does not go below 3 patrol cars on the road. The only other way to do it is to, and this is the other thing is, do I pull the commitment to the school? Do I pull that person out of school? I'm mandated by the governor that every school district must have a school resource officer. So again, what's my challenge? With the volume of calls down there, with everything going on, with a clear conscience, I can't say, we have to commit to that school because, Talitha Connor and Cecilia Cacciatore, they run around the clock. Now, one of the things is, does Cecilia Cacciatore, she's already helping fill staffing. So she'll get pulled out, the deputy chief will say to the sergeants, no, can't have her at the school, we need her to answer calls for service. So we're doing that juggling act as it stands now.
Does your resource officer fill in, like if people are on calls?
No.
No,
No,
so
school,
you wouldn't
the school
pull that?
resource officer cannot do that. You can't have a school resource officer, you can't commit the school resource officer to ensure security, safety, and a commitment to the school, and then say, oh, by the way, 4 to 5, we used to do that, 4 to 5 times a day, you're gonna get dispatched to a domestic violence call in Oakland Franklin. It's just not realistic, it's not an efficient use. At that point, I would just say, pull the officer out of the school if that's what we're gonna do. Because she could be in a classroom, she could be, she's got her radio, but she's not answering calls. She's answering calls within the 3 school districts.
Okay.
She's bouncing around to the central school, to the middle school, to the high school, then back. If an emergency happened and we had God forbid, a major incident, we all hands on deck, everyone's going to this call. That could happen, but on a daily
That's
basis,
an emergency type.
we can't do that.
Okay.
The college credit increases, that's all contractual.
Contractual obligations, and I'm a big supporter of that, to be quite honest with you. I think a better, and data shows, a better educated officer is gonna make better decisions. There's gonna provide better quality services. The more you train, the better services you're gonna provide the community, you're gonna reduce your exposure to liability, and you're gonna enhance the professionalism of the department. So I encourage our officers to have a degree. I mean, one of the things, and I'll touch on at the tail end, is, you know, I think at some point a degree should be mandatory just to get your foot in the door. Or there's gotta be an equivalent military service. There are no right now, to be a police officer in Massachusetts, all you need is a GED or a high school diploma. You know, as a profession, I think we need to set our standards higher than that, quite honest with you, but that's what civil service is. We're a civil service department, that's all they require. You gotta be a United States citizen and have a GED equivalent or a diploma. And again, I think so much of our veterans, I look to a veterans population as having that professional equivalent, that brings someone up. But I really think that the education piece, we can't have, you can never have enough education. I mean, my bachelor's is not in criminal justice, it was actually in teaching and education. Taught for one semester and I said, I'm gonna be a cop. But I say that facetiously, jokingly, but in reality, that was my background. I was gonna be a teacher and a coach. But I do think that, and that is a contractual obligation.
Quick question, on your 201 budget.
Yep.
You have, where you do have the civilian dispatchers still in, you have the civilian dispatch salaries increasing by 9%. That's not contractual though, correct?
Yes, it is.
It
Yeah,
is?
they fall under the
Okay.
personal bylaws, so all three are making step increases. This year, and I'm glad you picked up on that, this year, all three of the dispatchers fall under the personal bylaws. They're making contractual obligations. I also have 9 other officers making step increases. So I've got a total of 12 employees that are making step increases, which again is when you say a 2% increase in the contract, it yields a 3+ in the contract. Again, on the challenge.
Now, do the civilian dispatchers fall into a union?
They are not unionized.
They're not.
No, they fall under the personnel bylaws.
Okay.
On my personnel board.
And again, we have a competitive wage, but there are departments out there, there are places out there that are actually going a lot higher. And that's a challenge for us. And as Tim and I have talked, the fire chief and I have talked, is we've got to keep that at a competitive, because it's hard to find. I mean, we have 6 dispatchers now. We had 2 others that went through the training, and it just wasn't a fit for them or for us. And just like any other business in right now, you don't always hit it out of the park the first one. So that's we're trying to actually build up a call part-time dispatch list so that we can implement that to keep our costs down too.
And just going back to college credits, I know other departments have it contractual, but the amounts can vary. Yours, I think yours are,
Ours are steady
high.
across the board.
Okay.
We got out of the old Quinn bill, if you will, language, state funding years ago. Actually, I was on the bargaining that we did that. But we follow the same standard. It's 10% for 10% of the salary for a associate's, 20 for a bachelor's, 25% for a master's degree. And it is comparable. I know, on the education side, they have different incentives. They mirror one another fairly, closely. Any other questions on the 2Os? I'm glad you did hit on that because of, the step increases. Moving forward, I'm already forecasting FY '21 and '22. We've got 9 officers at low steps. Our struggle is gonna be 2021, 22, 23.
The longevity.
There's gonna be some challenges. The one thing, and I'm glad I kinda caught myself, both contracts, superior officers and patrolmen, expire June 30th. So we really need to look at the contracts, from both sides, obviously, because, I've talked to the associations and told them, listen, the town, we're in a struggle right now collectively across the board. I mean, I know the school has needs, and rightfully so, and, listening to, the senators and the state reps talk about, I know our neighbors in other towns are really struggling where overrides have, all kinds of things are being put out there for other communities just to do those level services. I've heard about, Whitman's in a struggle. I've heard, different, other communities, Bridgewater, I know. We're all in the same boat. So with town council, we've already talked, we have a couple initiatives and one of them, and I'll hit on it last year's, I want to get this department out of civil service. You know, and when people say, I say that, and they go, oh, geez, this chief, well, he's out of his mind, you know. The reason why I want to do it is because civil service came in 1894. It was needed to be implemented back then, the 1900s. To run a 21st century police department is impossible as a civil service department. And I don't say that to detract civil service, they got some great people working up there, but, you know, to run a professional business, you need to make business decisions. Right now, I call for a list, and they tell me you have to pick from these 6 people. You know, Fidelity Investments, State Street Bank doesn't say we're gonna hire people, but you have to be from the northwest corner of Norfolk County. That's what we do. You know, and Paul has done an outstanding job following up on it. We built an internship program. We average 3 to 5 interns. We have colleges across the state saying, we've heard about your great internship. We've got, 6 right now? We did it to help a college, because we would not typically do that, but one of the colleges said, hey, we've got 3 interns, they're seniors, they gotta graduate. So, you know, the deputy chief and the sergeants and our team has taken them on, but, you know, there were interns that I would hire in a heartbeat when they graduate here, but I can't, they don't live in town. And again, I wanna hire the best of East Bridgewater. On the towns that have left civil service, Norwood, Walpole, up in the North Shore, Reading, Burlington, all of Cape Cod is non-civil service. They typically end up coming back to their core residents, you know, but if there's someone from Bridgewater that's and I call it a diamond in the rough, you can actually hire that person and get them over here just like you would a business. In civil service, if they don't have civil service status, they can't come in the door. We lucked out on our last 2 hires because they had part-time civil service status in a neighboring town. But if it weren't for that, we would struggle to go through this process. And I have a whole presentation. I've presented to both associations with their labor council. Their labor council even said to me, Chief, it's a no-brainer, we get it. You know, and it's something that we're gonna make a priority in this negotiation that's coming up.
So
With
those two.
your,
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, in your budget, have you, I guess, estimated on the patrolman and senior, you've included, I guess, their potential raises?
Oh, no, I have put in a potential raise with step
You foresee,
increases.
okay.
What I foresee as
All right,
being
I just
what
wanted to
the
make sure
industry
that-
standard is right now.
Okay.
We've built that in there, so it does include that. You know, the 2 Os, as I said earlier, they don't mirror any increases in additional comp or expenses.
Right.
So that's gonna be a struggle right out of the gate, because they're gonna make more money, and I'm gonna have to pay them more to cover the overtime costs, but I'm not gonna have the money to do it. You know, right now, we're chasing money in other overtime, and the deputy chief is, we've really tightened up on where we're spending money, and we've told across the board, hey, we've gotta really think about, you know, how we spend our overtime. The problem that we have is I can't predict when these major situations happen. You know, and we had some awful incidences last year in 2018, where I actually at one point implemented increase in patrol, you know, and the incident with the kids from Stoughton, when that motor vehicle fatality, you know, and I remember saying to Paul and the sergeants, you know, we can't predict when that stuff's gonna happen. So, you know, if you only have 2 cars that are responding, and thankfully we had a great response to that call, but we've also had a couple instances where we're searching for missing people. You know, people are running away all the time, behavioral health, and we're putting together teams. By having the regional partnerships, that helps, but at the same time, if we don't have the pieces in place to respond to those, it's a struggle. I just can't predict when those events are gonna happen. So with our 2 Os, I've got those 2 presentations. Now, initially, and I think you might have one that says a 459, is that correct?
Yep.
So the 459 increases the salary, you know, personal service increases. We then mirrored an increase in additional comp so that the overtime coverages would at least have a bump up there to mirror some of the, you know, the cost increases that we would realize. And then on the 459, we did not increase the expenses. So when I came up with this, I apologize, I didn't pick up until afterwards. The 467, all that is increasing, like I did in additional comp, the expenses to mirror, you know, so all 3 categories would have an increase to mirror the salary and the step increases up top. You know, what my hope is that we get to this full staffing. I'm hoping that we're gonna be able to realize, you know, some savings in some of our overtime expenditures. Again, by having additional officers on the road, the idea is we'll have to fill less shifts. We won't have to fill vacation coverage as much, but again, in law enforcement, just like in fire, we do have there's a high propensity to have on-the-job injuries. I've been here since 1995. I don't know that we've ever been at the full capacity, for too long of a period of time of what we had budgeted. Because typically something will happen. So that's a struggle. I think with the newer officers coming on, we've got some young officers, physically fit, those are things that we're working on to maintain and to keep those, mitigate those issues. But, it's a struggle. So I mean, in reality, my 467, it's about $73,000 above my FY, existing budget. And again, we're not adding bells and whistles, we're meeting our salary obligations, and then I look at it as trying to, manage reasonably the expected increases in overtime and, expenses that would incur, through just, cost of living, price increases across the board. And I have my note here, it's 13 employees that are 13 total employees between dispatchers and officers that are making step increases. We are gonna, and I've talked with town council, we're gonna look at, anywhere in this contract that we, if we think we can find a savings or realize a savings, those are things that we're gonna present to the associations. I've been very, upfront with the Volt associations in telling them that, we are in the midst of, for lack of a better term, we're in a budget crisis, there's no question. We're struggling across the board, and I certainly recognize it. I've tried, working with our budget task force after my first year in 16, I'm constantly trying to learn about how the budget process works, where our funds are in different places, and, collectively work with my fellow department heads to see is there a way that collectively we can work together, which is why we're so entrenched with the superintendent's team at the school, Chief Herron in the fire department, Chief, with John Haynes down at the DPW, those consolidation pieces,
Right.
What can we do to conserve and save money? I think initially, we might not realize it, but the combined dispatching, I think we'll realize the savings. Once we get it, everyone cross-trained, once we get it implemented, once we work through the bugs on what we need for true manpower, because we're gonna be, we've never done it before, so we're gonna have to estimate what we think we need for coverage, and then they're, again, utilizing full-time with part-timers, which is how we're doing it now. I have 3 full-timers and 3 part-timers with that grant that are funding it, so I'm able to realize a cost. We're not paying benefits to, the part-timers, obviously, so that's a savings to the town as well.
So with the, and I did this with Chief Herron as well, so for the civilian dispatchers, it's more just being in a central location, that's the big gain, right? And productivity from that, from being in there, that's where it is. He's gonna kick in money, you're gonna kick in money, so really there's no, because at first I was like, why wouldn't there be savings, but you're kicking in
We're contributing what we have existing, in essence.
existing, just to be in the same location.
But
Like,
once we get them in
right.
the same location, I think we will realize, a savings, keeping in mind that they're gonna make more money. So the
Right.
savings may not, show as they're making step increases. The savings will be what would have been projected to have, one of his, command staff responding, and that's what, Tim, has to do at times is, he's got his firefighters on call, his deputy chief at times will have to answer the phones. A deputy chief that like,
I know,
and that's a
really.
challenge.
So I think it's important to
so-
know that, there's no net new to police, because it's existing.
Right.
It's net new from a fire perspective.
Right.
But then he hopes that by not having to do call-ins, he'll save on the call-in
He'll save on the
portion of
calls.
it.
He'll also he'll save by having more, that extra body available for
Yep.
calls for service in time.
So
And then
staffing.
I think it's gonna, I really think that we'll streamline this process as we work through. There'll be bugs, But as we work through it.
Efficiency will be huge.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things, when you get to the efficiency, everyone's trained or whatever, is it possible, not saying it is or isn't, I know that you use the part-time folks to fill in for vacations. Is it possible to explore that to save benefits? Some money there, by adding part-time people instead of full-time? I don't know, I just throwing out different things, because, you get the savings from on the
So-
benefit side.
And that's, we actually were at a higher full-time number, and actually the deputy chief really was the one that kind of brought it up, and we started talking. At the end of the day, you've got to cover 15 full-time shifts.
Yep.
So that's right there. Then you have the remaining 6 shifts for coverage, because this is 24/7. Now, out of those 15 full-time shifts, 5 of those, based off of the call volume on the days, right, it's got to be 2 people. So you can't, to break that up logistically,
Right,
like I said, we trained 8 people to net 6 positions over the last 15 to 18 months. We're gonna have to train others. You're gonna have to train more people than you're gonna realize the actual numbers, because what will happen is someone will get a better offer from a higher paying, regional
Right.
dispatch center,
yeah.
or we'll
If
have.
everyone's going to that, you're gonna fight this battle
Right.
forever.
So we looked real hard at going to regionalization with the 3 Bridgewaters, West Bridgewater, Bridgewater. We don't have the infrastructure here, so we would definitely have to farm it out. It is not a savings to me. And my partner or colleague over in Hanson is now probably gonna realize a $500,000 increase, because dispatching is going to a regional dispatch center, but he still needs to maintain the staff at the police station. I told you, 2,500, it's probably about 3,500 calls,
Yep.
walk-ins at the station. For me to say to the residents, you're gonna come in the police station now and not have someone to help you right away, in a 21st century police department, I don't see how we do that.
Right,
You
it
know,
doesn't sound
Could we do it
successful
with
that way.
a civilian? Yes,
Yeah.
but now you're back to, you're having a civilian. The regional dispatching does not save the town money. The
Yep.
state is enticing people to do it because they're giving these incentive grants. But in reality, if those grant monies dry up,
Then
you're
we're
now
on.
on the hook for that, and you have no control over it. And again, we're gonna keep on revisiting the regionalization with the 3 Bridgewaters, but right now, it's not a fit. We put in for the grant last year, we didn't get it. They gave the existing money to the existing, and they're definitely
Because
trying
it
to pull
wasn't
people.
working as they
Because
had
all those costs are going
anticipated.
up, and you talked about some of the, all those issues, they're gonna make more money. I mean, I saw an area dispatching position that was $47,000 to $65,000.
Wow.
I mean, that's, right now, we're paying, we're below, $20 or less an hour to start, and you bump up. I mean, we're not paying that type of money, we
kind of money.
can't.
Yeah.
And the mark, or the area where we're targeting is people that wanna be in law enforcement, that can use this for a foot in the door, 2, 3-year transition period, get them ready, and then they can be police officers. But that's why we're gonna wanna have a reserve group, not only to help supplement overtime costs, but also to have them ready, because inevitably, we know with our existing dispatchers, within 2 to 3 years, someone's gonna not get a job offer. We already had one that got a job offer to go full-time as a police officer. Again, another challenge.
On the salaries, I know you talked about the civilian dispatchers, and that's not unionized.
Yep.
Why is their year-over-year increase so large at 9%?
So 3 of them are getting all 3 full-timers are getting
Those
step
steps,
increases. They're getting
okay.
step increases this year, and that's just, again, part of
Why are there steps in a non?
personnel bylaws have,
It's the personnel bylaws, it's something that really,
we need
to be
to look at it this year, because there were some changes made prior to me that, those steps is sustainable. There's gonna be some high ones that I'm gonna struggle with. I've
Because-
talked to town council.
Well, and if, to the point that you made,
Well, and
just your increase in personnel services exceeds 2%.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's
Right.
no way this is sustainable over
right.
a 4 or 5 year period.
Yeah, it's definitely not in the, the steps need to be looked at, the whole personnel kind of grade, like the grades and the steps, I mean, why do we need that?
Well, we had that conversation with another department.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, we
They're
did.
not
I
in
have
a
talked to
position
town
has to be.
council
We did
about
have that
looking
other
at this for
discussion,
this
but-
year's, as a, potential,
So
area.
it's the same thing for the patrolman then? It's the steps?
No, it's not the same amount, but they're getting increases, so they
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
similar
They all,
grid.
everybody has grids.
They all have their own
It's
grid, but
archaic.
it's not
Theirs
the
is
same amount.
contractual.
Theirs is contractual.
Contractual,
It's just
right,
archaic.
right.
I mean,
So,
it's
to
archaic.
that question, who, so I'm gonna ask this of everybody, because I'm
Yes.
starting to get into it. Who actually does the actual negotiations with those two unions?
For the two unions, for the police
yeah.
patrolmen, so, the town does it, town council negotiates with, the town administrator and the unions.
Okay.
So
And
through the
I
town.
assume you're a part of that
I've
as
been
well?
part of it, yes.
Okay.
And, we've already
Yeah,
started
each of
talking
the
with.
department heads would be part of it with.
Town
their-
It's no
council.
different than the fire department,
Yep.
so, we've already talked. I've talked with Mr. Sammy, I've talked with town council, Jamie Kenny is our, police lead at
Yeah.
town council. And, we've talked about, things that we need to look at.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Scott?
Just real quick,
Chief Allen?
the 2.05, you said that's cutting 2 dispatches?
Roughly, it's basically cutting 49, it's.
So it's not 2 full-time positions, it would be
The part-time.
hours?
Realistically, what we would have to
Yeah.
do is try to piecemeal
Yeah.
those losses together.
Okay.
And that's, and I understand 100% where you're coming from.
Yeah.
The strategic, or operationally to do that, to find people, who would be willing to split, and then to fills.
Right.
It could potentially be done. It could also be a potential logistical nightmare, to be
Oh, I
able to
definitely
find
think it
people
would be
that.
that.
Yeah.
What is the cost of training someone new for you guys?
Well, for us, I mean, the state does provide some funding, you're talking a couple $1,000s between, there's 10 mandatory days, but then the field training piece. I mean, it's really sitting down with the dispatcher, some pick it up, it can be weeks. Typically, it's been a 3-month process, so we'll pay them to attend trainings. You're talking several $1,000s upfront just to invest in them. And that's the challenge too, because you can spend a couple $1,000s to get through the 10 days of training, and as happened with us, we had 2 that didn't work out.
Right.
So there's a balance there
right.
too.
And I'm just throwing these things out there to try to, just ask questions and see if we can, find alternative ways
Absolutely.
where we are, as you mentioned, in a budget crunch. So sometimes you're throwing out crazy ideas or offshoot ideas, maybe something will.
I've said to anyone, look at my
Stick at
budget.
some
If you
point.
find something
Right.
in my budget you think that I
Yeah.
can recoup. I mean, like I said, when I took over, the first thing I did I did a 4-year look back at every
Yep.
line item. And then, as Michelle, you remember,
Yep.
I restructured or reorganized because some line items within the, additional comp
Right.
had not been increased, but we were taking money from other lines in there. So now I have a better, more accurate idea on cost per line item. The problem for us between police and fire is overtime. There's 6 line items
Filling in the
there.
shifts.
To predict court duty, cover vacation, other investigations, and then other, which is shift coverages, or, hey, something happened at shift change, and we gotta hold you over for 4 hours. Those holdovers happen all the time. And on the weekends, we try to increase our manpower, our officer power, because we have more volume of calls.
Do you have a minimum for the holdover?
Well, we tried to do it. I actually wanted to implement minimum of 3 officers on the road, and we tried doing that early on.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase the question. Do you, when you have an officer's minimum hours,
No,
thank you.
No, we can hold them 2 hours.
So-
1 hour, 2
If
hours,
I
whatever it
order
is.
them in for duty, I have to pay them a minimum of 4. If they're a holdover, we pay them hour for hour. So what the deputy chief has done a real efficient job on is mitigating and managing those 1 and 2 hour, standbys. So if we can get something done the next morning on their next tour duty, that's what we do. Or if we can pass a
Instead of
call
the 4
off
hours.
to the next shift, we're doing that. And that's I have staff meetings, usually 2 staff meetings a month. And the first thing we talk about is we look at the overtime expenditures over the prior 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Where can we cut? Where do we have mistakes? On a daily basis, the deputy chief is looking at shifts and saying, hey, Sergeant, do we need to fill that shift? Or can we utilize someone in another way? Again, we do deal with the contract, but, you know, we work within the context of the contract. There is some flexibility, but a lot of it is mandated through the CBA.
All right. Does anyone have any more questions?
No, it was really helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, each and every one of
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you.
Thanks for your time.
You too.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul. Michelle? Just grab a water.
Of course, go ahead.
No, you must. I finished.
Go ahead.
No, you must be tortured.
Yes. So, let's see, so next on the list, I am going to hand out, I have some handouts and I have some other items. Okay, so I'm handing out this, it was received by the Board of Selectmen, yesterday, March 11th. This is the school's certified budget. You guys may have already seen it.
Not in this format.
So, I guess this is by their account number with no details behind it. That's all I have on that. Any-
So,
Just by, okay.
Go ahead.
is,
I can see if I can line it up with some of the other documents I
Yeah,
have to be
'cause
more
this isn't
helpful to
very
you
helpful.
guys.
Yeah, or we can
This
ask,
at all.
yeah.
We'll ask, I guess, I'm
can tell.
assuming,
Email
The
John.
accountant's office.
yeah,
should
I'm
be able to
assuming
just
this
do it.
20,879,000 will actually line up with their presentation when they come
Believe it does.
next week.
Yeah, I believe it lines up with the
Yeah,
public
I'm
one.
assuming it does, but I have nothing to
Okay.
talk about tonight because I really don't know what that is.
It's funny that they just didn't have just one other column, just to say what the account,
is,
what the
yeah.
account is, the account name, you know, you have the number.
Alright, this is my personnel board, let's see. So, let's see, I actually have a lot of stuff that I wrote for notes today. Alright, so I got this email, I'm gonna pass it out, is actually the library, grid that we had talked about. So,
Again?
yes, this is redone. And at this point, I'm not sure who actually,
I think there's it's
there's two
right?
pages each, yeah,
Okay.
2 pages.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
A pack. Yes, Laura?
Oh, so
One's the old one, one's the new proposed.
Yeah, I think one's old, one's
And
proposed.
this is, was not included in their presentation to us earlier? This is different,
No,
we
remember
think?
how we said it was going to need to be redone because of, there was a person who,
I think I have it.
Was
Do you want me
coming-
to look?
was coming in. Or something.
I'm on weeds right now.
Mm.
There was an issue, if you recall, during, when the library came and presented to us, and he said that the grid was going to, I don't even have my notes, but the grid was going to need to be done again. So I believe this one is the one from last year that we had. And I believe this is what they just redid,
Okay.
to update based on, a new starting salary or something. Just trying to think.
I just looked in my packet and there wasn't anything in there.
I think from the first visit they made to us, and I don't know that I had.
Yeah, and I don't have it right now in my note. I actually didn't bring that today. I brought a different pack of papers. Let me just double check. Oh, so down back and went to the Browns.
I saw that.
Oh, boy.
Interesting
Getting
trade.
sidetracked. So, I'm just gonna check my email for that.
Here, it was in this packet. I don't know if this will help you.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it will help you or not, but that was the packet.
That was what he
That
brought
was
in,
what
right?
he
Yeah,
brought
it was
in the
what he
first
brought
time.
in, right, and he had said that it needed,
The first one?
it had to do with somebody's, so a certain person's salary.
Oh,
This
yes.
doesn't have to do with the youth librarian, because that was just a one-off to bring her
Yeah,
up
that
to
was
grade.
between,
Exactly, I think.
So the
Do
one
you
they,
remember what meeting that was that they
It was
had
the
come?
first one.
yeah, and but it was the
No, but do you remember the date?
On here it says January 22nd.
22nd, yep.
So
I guess I'm a little
This, see,
they have it
That's
saying
what it is.
compensation schedule of 29, okay.
I think that's all tied to one employee, though.
it
says
is,
18.
to reclassify
Did I say 19?
professional level, step 2. As of February 1st, would require an additional, oh, no, that was,
Yeah, this was just, he needed additional, he
Right.
wanted to have
Yeah, I
additional
don't
money
think
in this
that's what
fiscal
this
yeah,
year.
no, this was,
out.
it needed to be I remember it needed to be redone.
From their
For
notes
something.
from their presentation. It's
It,
in
like,
here
well,
somewhere.
and every year it's gonna need to be redone?
I probably didn't even do it
I just looked through my note. I can't find anything in regards to
I don't
the
remember
salary
this at
scare in my notes that I just looked up from the January 22nd meeting.
Is that when they presented their budget?
No,
No,
it was the first time they came in.
It was when they talked about that salary change
Yeah.
for the salary issue that they had.
Because these folks don't fall under personnel board, correct?
And this has to be voted on every town meeting.
Every town meeting, because it's,
So does this just
it's
represent?
like because it's by the library trustees, so it has to be voted on. The grid does
122.
every year.
I think what it's doing is that it's a 2% increase to every,
Every line, did you double check
I
that?
mean,
So
I
my
just did
notes,
that for step
my notes
one.
don't talk about the grid at all. We only talked about, at that meeting, the grade issue for the
Yeah.
young librarian.
Yes, correct, I remember that.
Yeah.
I'll give this back to Jennifer.
Sorry, it wasn't helpful.
No,
Yeah, everything's a 2% increase.
okay. So maybe that's what it is.
This is just their proposal.
Just the
But
one.
then should it go
Yeah.
into the step? Is the step is the only thing that they get? It's not like the step and scale. It's not,
And they don't fall into the, right, correct, Michelle, they do not fall into the personnel bylaws?
No, they do not.
Okay, so this is just them following the trend
Right,
of,
so
it's
library
not like-
trustees get voted on each year in the warrant.
so it's not like they get a cost of living and this. It's
No,
just, this
this
is
is
flat.
only
This is
this.
flat.
but
Okay.
it lives completely outside
Outside.
of everything else, which is why it's voted every year.
Gotcha.
Fine.
I just wanted to make sure that there weren't two components to it.
But I can't
But see, like, then,
find it.
like, the page step 6 is like a 7.8%
What?
increase.
So,
Which page are you referring to?
It's the
first
bottom
page, the
category,
2020.
the line
Oh,
item
page, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Gotcha.
If you look at the or the proposed, article, page level clerk, step 6 is 1478. The 2019 was 1371. That's a 7.8% increase.
I thought he had said that he would, the page was out of the budget.
One of the two.
One of the two, okay.
So there's it. Here it is, library grid. Yeah, she just said, Rebecca sent it to me today and said attached you'll find what has been submitted and what it should look like. Please advise committee of the grids, and would you like to move forward with it?
See, then, like, I mean, I guess we'd have to look at all of these, because if you look
Yeah.
at admin assistant level 1,
Right.
it's actually. Oh, no, I did that, wait, yeah, I did that.
I think we need to
backwards, so-
probably take this.
Yeah, we'll take a
kinda
look
take a
at
look
it.
at it, because
Yeah.
I don't wanna put us, I think we're gonna go right back into the last year where we had an incorrect grid last year.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Or the-
let's,
And the year before that.
yeah, let's
So-
just, well,
Maybe we can all take a look at it and process it.
yeah, send me
Somebody wanna?
any notes you have on it. Nothing should be more than 2% increase.
And even then,
Yeah.
that should be our starting point. A corrected grid
Right,
should then be our starting point for discussion.
right.
So do you want us to focus on
Because-
this page?
Needs to be a comparison of the two.
Right, because you know what's interesting is that this grid from November 6th, 2018, right? And then it's compensation schedule FY 2020. This is for FY 2020 as well.
Yeah, there's two that say
And-
2020, so
Right,
which?
because
Oh,
they did
They're not even the
two,
same.
they're not.
Some.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying is
That's what
that,
they're correcting is the November 6th to this.
right, that's what they're trying to correct, is this 2020. And he talked about it, I know he did, but I just forget what he said. So you know what, I'll send an inquiry tomorrow about this.
A lot of the same.
That's closer to 2%. It is a 2% on this one. This one's at a 7.
So why new grid from November 6th?
Right. Like that.
Michelle,
That's
I
it.
guess my question to you is, this grid really needs to, whatever the budget ends up with, ends up at for the library,
Yeah.
is going to shift this grid, correct? Depending on what we end up
Library's
with.
budget would shift according to
Yeah.
this grid.
Correct.
I guess I'm thinking about it the wrong way. It would shift the, okay, I just,
Library's budget.
Right.
so that might impact them considerably, okay.
Yep. All right, so I'll send an inquiry into this tomorrow, just to get that. All right. Next thing. All right, so we also received this letter in the box, and I believe it is, this is in response to a letter that Board of Selectmen had received about the school committee's budget. I'm not gonna take the time to read it now, but if you wanted to read it at your leisure. And like I said, it literally, I just picked it up from the box, so I don't really know. Okay. Okay, so we have that, some more things. That's my stuff. So then, did everyone have an opportunity to look at the letter of interest?
did.
I did.
Okay, so at this point in the year, I believe we can fill it. I don't really know the rules around, filling it. It's the only person who's expressed interest in the position. So we can always call him in to meet with us here at a meeting and ask some questions. I think that's probably the way to go. At this point, I wouldn't assign any liaisons if we did decide to, for a fit. We're almost at the end.
Right.
We have to
Well-
find,
We're not really almost at the end, but.
we have to
we're
find
getting
time
there.
to do it too, because our meetings
Right,
are
so-
very booked up for the next.
Right, and which I have that here next to talk about that at this point. So we'll call him in at some point. I'm just not sure when. How about that? Does that work for everyone?
One point I was going to make was that because we had 3 new members this year,
Yep.
I might even, just a thought, entertain delaying until the next year so that we don't have 4 terms expiring in the same year, potentially having a big turnover at one point.
They're not, because they're,
Oh, replacement.
you're assigned to whatever opening there was. So if someone didn't
Oh,
finish a
okay.
term,
Okay.
You finish out that
you
term.
finish
and
out
then
that
be
term and then you
appointed again.
reapply.
Hold on, I think, because I
But the
happen
3
to
of
have.
us all have the same
yeah.
expiration on the board.
I know
Actually-
Laura and I are up in
I can tell you right-
2019.
Now, what
Then
does
there's
that
2020 and the 21.
Yeah, how
So it's
would,
a 3-year,
Right,
tell
but
you-
we didn't
How would you
replace.
So the 3 new
determine-
folks, though, are on all the same term.
oh, they are?
Yeah, they're all 2021, Crystal's a 2020, you and I are both 19.
So what happens with you, so you guys
I'm not sure
are
that's right,
19,
though.
so.
Maybe it's
but
not.
how would
What
you
is that?
determine which person we
You just have to
filled?
go to the
I think,
selectmen
because I
and-
understand what you're saying. If
It
you
goes in
fill-
order, so they probably just
They probably
randomly.
just ask us,
Because
yeah.
when Tim Armin and I joined, I filled someone that had resigned, but he didn't. So then we were off year. So
Hmm.
I filled someone's term and finished that out for 2 years, and then
So Chris was up, I think.
he could have been actually up, yeah.
Emily, I don't know.
Emily was up.
Emily was up as well, so
Yeah.
that makes sense. And then,
Tim
no, John,
Ward,
yeah. I don't know about John.
and I'm not sure, I think he was not the same year as I, because he was earlier
So he
than
might
I.
have been up too.
So maybe that's the case.
I don't
maybe
know,
we'll
he wasn't up.
fold.
I know he wasn't up, actually. He had just,
All
I
right.
think he
I
had.
just
But-
don't think it's
but
good
to
to
Dan's
have
point-
both
2
with the
years.
same.
To Dan's point, though, that
Yeah.
is a good point.
Yep.
We should just check it before.
Yep.
that's
It
all.
might give you a little stagger.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that. Because
the
at this
same
point,
time, though, it might be
we're
helpful for him to come in and just
come to the
see
meetings,
out
yep.
the end of it, but
Yep.
I can see it both ways.
Yep.
Okay, so this we. Alright, so we have that, this is my stuff here. And that's just an extra, okay, alright. Everyone got my message that Southeastern is coming in May 6th? I don't have a time yet, but I'm assuming it will be for the Board of Selectmen meeting that night.
Because that's
So
the
that
night the
would be-
school was presenting anyway to the board.
What?
Was that, I think, the same night the school was presenting anyway?
I believe it is, however, we're not
Oh, those
doing
aren't
that now.
Oh, okay.
That was, did everyone get my email on
I
that?
saw that they weren't confirmed, but I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
know
they're,
that.
I don't believe they're doing them,
Oh, okay.
anymore.
Okay, so
So we'll book May 6th, but.
So
just-
definitely May
Yeah,
6th
the
for
ones-
Southeastern folks are coming to present.
Okay.
I don't believe that we are, well, at this point, none of those are scheduled with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
and we don't know if they
The-
are going
It
to
was
be
a
or not.
tentative schedule at best, and I was told that at this point, they have not been voted on, approved, anything.
'Cause they were supposed to
And I
start
don't know if it's
yesterday.
because we're meeting and the meetings are taped, so they don't feel that they
Well,
need to come to
Scott mentioned
the.
he was gonna be going,
He,
so
yeah,
we'll see.
I don't know if he knows that they haven't approved that yet. Or he's just assuming from the prior process he could be, you know what I mean? So, at this point, I was told yesterday that they don't have anything definitive.
We can't ask.
No. That's just more.
So we need to reschedule.
Yes. So I have here, what I did was just make a copy of basically 4 months. Everyone has a copy of these, which is the dates leading up to the town meeting of June
You
10th.
emailed that, right?
I did email it. I didn't know if people wanted a copy.
I would love a copy.
I'll take one if you have one.
I have, yeah, so for everyone.
Thank you.
I might already copied it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I did, and, you know. Okay.
It might be the straw that breaks my back. Literally.
So, I just basically, just so we could kind of get on the same page, because we just have so much going on, I printed just 4 months' worth of a calendar and started putting dates on it that we already have confirmed, and I will send it out to you guys, just to have, you don't need to print it, you can just put it in your calendar or however you use, but, so far I have on here 7 o'clock police tonight, 7 o'clock for the school next Tuesday
I think they were
night.
6:30.
Oh, is it 6:30? It could be 6:30.
I think so. I'll double check. Does
I
anyone
have
else?
6:30 too.
6:30.
It's 6:30, actually. I remember I
Yeah.
wanted to start that
You
one
wanted to go a
early.
little earlier, right?
And you know what? I think I did tell Chief Allen 6:30, but I posted the meeting for 7.
For tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, I had it as 7 when I.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion. We started out at 6, or the first time he booked, we had to reschedule because of the weather.
Maybe.
It was at 6:30 that night, and this one was at 7.
We are posted for 6:30 next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
6:30 school next week. And then we need, you're not gonna, yeah, we know you're gonna be on vacation.
Sorry. I'll be thinking of
Where are
you.
you
Oh, yeah,
going?
no, you won't.
You can stream it live.
I could.
Delayed, sorry.
No, we are
Oh,
gonna be
it's delayed. Oh.
downstairs.
Oh, we're gonna be downstairs?
I think we're downstairs,
We're
right? So
downstairs
it's gonna be
for
live.
next week,
Oh,
so.
maybe.
it
Oh,
will be
so-
live, yeah.
I don't know where you're going, but.
We did get a meeting, yeah,
polls
an
closed,
update on that, so. And then, okay, so I have that, then I just put this sheet, I put these, I'm not gonna go through all the dates, but I did put this sheet out here leading up to the special and annual town meeting on the 10th. So at this point, it's my understanding they're doing both a special and an annual.
Now, are we, like, I don't know if it's something that we could do, like have like a, you know, the app Cozy? Could we have like a Cozy calendar? Is that
I don't know what that
allowed?
is.
It's an app that we could, you share a calendar.
Oh.
We'd all have like our emails in it, like I use it for my husband so he knows where I am at any given point, but.
Yeah, we can definitely try that.
I
That'd be-
can try, I'll try to set one up.
Okay.
And send you guys, if you
Yeah,
don't
that
mind
sounds
getting an
easier
email
than
about it.
the
but
old-fashioned write in
it,
and then type in.
There's
and
a
then-
free one that seems
Yeah.
to serve the
Okay.
purposes, but,
Yeah, I just wanted something visual for us tonight,
oh,
so,
yeah, definitely.
you know, but definitely, I would definitely like that.
Well, next year when we get the Google Chromebooks, you could
Right.
have a Google Calendar.
I'm sure we're on the list. Okay, so then, let's talk about rescheduling our March 4th night, which includes the assessor, Board of Selectmen, and the treasurer.
And we
So,
need to do that on a Monday night,
We have
right?
to do that on a Monday. So,
Can you pull up the town calendar to see when Board of Assessors meetings are?
I can.
Just because that can be kind of hard.
right,
for-
and, I do, funny you mention that, but I happen to have that in my personnel board.
I had something down for March 25th for the Board of Selectmen. Did we maybe propose that on March 25th?
March 25th is the articles we're gonna be
That
there.
might have been, I think that was
I
one
wonder
of
if
the,
that
one
was
of the
one of the
tentative
dates.
meetings.
One of the tentative meetings.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But
All right.
also, articles are supposed to be reviewed by us,
So you're supposed to have it, we're gonna have to do it before then.
We do.
Which
We
for
need
what?
we basically need to do this the 18th if they have a meeting. But they just had a meeting this week, the 11th, so they don't have a meeting till the 25th, that's why it's out there. So it's gonna be the 25th is the next,
So we have to have it on the 18th, and do we have enough time to post it? Do you need 7 days?
25th and 48 hours, so 2 days.
I'm lost.
need-
Can we
okay.
back up? What do
We
we need to
can't-
have done by when?
The Board of Selectmen meeting was the 11th, they meet every other week,
Right.
so the next one won't be till the 25th.
But I guess what, I'm sorry, I'm thinking in my head and not speaking. So if the
Yeah.
articles need to be, if the articles are being presented on March 25th,
So we need to do on the 18th, you're correct. I'm wrong.
so even if they're every other, they're gonna have to post another one, because we won't get it done in time, right? For the articles, or am I?
No,
No,
they
no,
can do
no.
whatever, they can, that, he was just letting us know we're not, the articles won't be done. There's no way.
There's no way.
There's
All
no
right, so they're not gonna be able to,
This
okay.
is just a
All right.
time frame.
Yeah,
That's why
okay.
they're-
Yeah, I'm like,
No,
like a month.
time frames.
No, I didn't think so, but I
Yeah.
just didn't know if I'm
And
looking
he
at
has the
this.
whole month of,
So March 18th, we
yeah.
should try.
So
for.
we need to try for March 18th.
Next Monday.
So you're gonna
that's-
reach out to Paula.
Yep.
Worst comes to worst, if George
There is planning board that night.
or Pa,
That- I
that's
don't
all
think
right,
it matters.
that doesn't matter. If George or Paula can do, whoever can do it that night, we need to meet and,
Get that
yes,
out of the way.
whoever. So I will send an email to George to see if he is able to meet
So that means we have no Dan that night, because you're away.
3/18.
So there's a
Um,
Board of Health meeting, a planning board meeting.
How early
a
are you
public
potentially
hearing.
gonna be starting?
Well-
Hopefully not too early, because that's 2 meetings in a row.
I
and It
know.
might be a little hard.
6:30,
Okay.
is that all right?
It'd be tight for me. I have a board of trustees meeting in town.
that's
that-
fine.
That
So
doesn't
don't
get out
come.
till 4. Oh, no, I can come, I just,
Yeah.
So saying 6:30
coming in on two
the
wheels.
18th?
I think so, because they leave, so we just
Yeah,
want,
only here
on the
till 8,
18th,
I
if we
think.
could potentially do, I mean, the assessors is not a large
No.
budget,
No.
and there's really not a lot to it. It's the treasurer that has a lot, because it shows all the debt. And then the Board of Selectmen, which has a lot of different things in it.
So does that matter that you have, there's a Board of Health meeting at 6, a planning
No, 'cause
board
we already-
meeting at 7.
we
and
already
then
did
public
Board of
hearing?
Health.
Board of Health is done.
Yep.
So why don't we do 6:30 that
Wise.
night, if we can?
Doesn't matter the rooms or anything like that?
planning board's
I
not,
bet you the first floor will be open. We'll find
planning's
out.
not even in here, I don't think.
Is Board of Health up here?
If they're both up here at the same time, then
They
it
might
would be a
yeah.
conflict. You know what? I'll just ask what their availability is, and then we'll figure out the room.
Yeah.
You're gonna talk to Paula?
Yep, I'll email her.
Okay. I'll email the town administrator, see what they
6:30?
have,
Yeah, 'cause
and 6:30, get here when you can. We'll start with Paula, and then
yeah, that's
we'll
fine.
start with the assessor at 6:30. At 10 minutes to 7, we'll do
George.
George.
That works.
He's not gonna be happy, I don't think, about that, but. 6:30, assessor if we can. And then 7 o'clock, we'll do BOS and treasurer. He can do whatever he wants, both, because. Okay, so email George. All right, and then once that, we have our May 6th for Southeastern. And then, okay, so that's it. So I did have a meeting with the Personnel Board last night, and what we did was, we had to approve someone's salary. We approved, someone's salary who was, falls outside of the union. And then, for EBCTV, EBCAM. And then and also worked on for, I can't even think of, oh, look. And assess the salaries for van drivers and function people, function folks. That was it.
Does the administrative assistant contract fall under that board as well?
The administrative assistant clerk.
Clerks,
clerk,
I think
sorry.
clerks union, is that done yet, do we know?
Clerks union is not here because it's a union.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
clerks union, I believe, is almost done. If not, it just needs to be signed or something. It's close. But that doesn't fall under the personnel board. The personnel board follows everyone in the town who does not have,
Non-union.
it's all non-union.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then, and then maybe you can just provide a little more context to the whole personnel bylaws, so basically, all of those folks
Yeah.
fall into, under the personnel board,
Yes.
and the personnel board, or all those folks, basically follow the same methodology with these steps and grids.
Yes. Well, one of them that falls on there is the town clerk, because it's an elected position. So that salary has to be voted on at the personnel board every year.
Okay.
It's, since she's an elected, she doesn't fall into any union. So, but that is, approved at town meeting.
Yep.
So, that gets voted on there. And then appointed officials, which would be the admin here, for example, the admin to the Board of Selectmen. It falls under that. And the reason that that person is not in the union is because of privacy laws and the information that they have access to. So that's why they are not in the union and they're separate. So we review and vote on that kind of stuff. But it's all stuff that is already within the budgets. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's already in the budgets that they're just
Right.
not there, so.
I guess I'm thinking of it more of,
Like you're already seeing it in all the budgets here.
right.
Yep.
But if it got to a point where a department had to make changes or make cuts, kind of similar to some of the other conversations we had with, well, if you have to hire a position, do you have to hire that position as a union position? Or, again, where does the town have some leeway to make changes, if changes are necessary, if cuts
I'm just
are
saying in these
necessary?
particular ones where they fall outside the union,
Right,
they won't be, they're in every department's budget,
yeah,
but they just are not in a union,
yeah.
you know?
But they are.
Like, for
but
example.
they are considered contractual, I guess, is my question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For example, Jason Trapania from the Water Department and Rob Ken. Both of those are not, because they're management positions,
Yep,
so they are not union. So they fall under this.
okay.
But they're also, their salaries are also included in the budgets, like and everything. But the contracts,
Now,
Yeah.
but the civilian dispatchers do not fall into this. I didn't believe.
let me check.
Okay.
He said no, right?
I thought he said no, but
I don't believe they are.
Okay.
Like, we have the van drivers,
Mhm.
They're
And
under bylaws.
the, there's like a whole
Maybe they
section.
are meant by that.
Right,
If we said they were under the personnel bylaws, then they
They
would
are.
fall. Okay,
Yes.
then they would.
they're
fall.
under the personnel
My notes
bylaws.
are reliable.
Okay.
You're right.
No, okay, that does sound right.
They are here,
I'm going back and
by the
trying
way.
to-
Okay.
So, this package is growing. Anyway, so that was that. Let's see. Oh, here's my list. All right, so we talked about that, letter of interest we talked about. So, Next steps, along with creating a calendar, we need to figure out when we can meet just as a group, once these presentations are over. And I guess, food for thought for next year, we need to start 2 weeks earlier. I mean, it's just, you know, because of the snow, the cancellations, rescheduling, what have you, it just makes no sense to go this late, you know, whatever. We just need to get on top of that, to make sure that we're starting earlier. But,
I think it'll be easier to start earlier next year because 3 of us won't be brand new and kind of like, well, what do you want us to do?
Right.
We'll be more likely
Yeah,
to just
yep.
jump in. Be different.
agreed. Let's see. We need to find, all right, so we're gonna do the date of 3/18, hopefully with the assessor and everything, which then brings us up to March 26th, April 2nd. So, looks like right now we have the whole month of April. However, next steps as I see it is we need to do a budget review. Basically, I want us to go through, talk about every budget that we've found, questions that we have, things that we think, you know, where we make suggestions of what we have for the budget. Is there things that we want to work with, or not work with? Just everyone just really come with their own ideas. And it doesn't have to just be your liaison budgets, it can be any budget. We need to discuss them all, and that's gonna have to be where we are. You know, from what I'm hearing, the money still is not where it needs to be, and there's going to be issues.
When
So-
will we get like a recap of what monies?
Well, that's what, so that was my next point to that is, I'm gonna put together a spreadsheet that lists the revenues coming in versus the expenses that we have. You know, technically, they should wash, for a balanced budget, but I don't know what we have for numbers. So I'm gonna, do some investigating. Laurie, you were out there yesterday and
Yeah.
looked, and,
No updates,
No
still,
updates.
no updates on the cherry sheets. I looked at the timelines, as Dan, I think you looked at too, and I think it's still looking like it's probably gonna be I think it was like still through into April, so we're not gonna see
Yeah.
anything for a little while, I don't
So-
think.
what I would like to do, because maybe we don't have the money yet, is really just see where we are by taking everyone's proposed budgets that they have, put it against our estimates, and see where we are. I think there's a big difference. I think, just from listening to people,
Can you
listening,
send out the estimates, or can you get even those together?
I don't know if we can, I mean, oh, you mean me?
Yeah, or just,
Of
Yeah.
all
For
the
every-
revenue sources?
Yeah,
the
Just
revenue
I mean, the cherry
sources.
sheets, the preliminary cherry sheets out, but,
Yeah,
Right.
but it's
Yeah,
not,
there's
gonna-
nothing.
because I
it's
wouldn't
not even
know even where to
approved.
start of, like, what to compare it to
Yeah.
at this point.
Well, what we need to do is basically take where we are, adding up everyone's 2% budgets, adding up all the real needs budgets, and then putting it against the money we've gotten in, or estimated, you know, for the first pass, but
Right.
I think you said yesterday it hadn't even hit the House. So,
I think it's still, the governor's budget is still out there, yeah.
yeah.
And they didn't say anything last night in regards to when.
They were gonna ask, but I don't know if they
Don't
had any
know.
ideas. They may not know. So that's our next step, is to really start to analyze where we are versus
Where we need to be.
estimates and where we need to be.
Well, yeah, and once we do that first pass, we'll be able to, like, kind of ultimately have a little,
Right.
you know, a variable component. We can, okay, if it picks up
Right.
another 10%, this is where we'll be.
Right,
And we can
at
kinda
least we
like
can,
Have some
that.
thought process going as to, if it's this, then what? If it's this, it's that, you know.
right,
We've got to get that going.
which I think is important. So, we're meeting hopefully the 18th. We're meeting the 18th and 19th. Then, do we want to meet again to review all these budgets on the 26th? Or do you want to take a week off and go to April 2nd?
I would say if we could take a week off and go to April 2nd, we're really not taking a week off because you're gonna meet on the 25th.
No, we're not meeting on the 25th, I don't think.
I-
Because you know what, we're not gonna have any money
No,
out
but
there, so. It just says articles reviewed by the finance committee
No,
treasurer.
we just
Oh.
booked you want,
No, they're coming the 18th. We're trying to do next week.
you're trying to do, I'm
Because it's
so
the off
sorry.
week, it's the off week of the
Gotcha.
Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. No, I didn't delete it from when I had, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had said the 25th, we went to the 18th, and I didn't delete it, so sorry.
No
But,
worries.
so the 26th works for me. I don't know if, that's fine then, if we're not meeting on the 25th.
Do we want to do the 26th or the 2nd?
I would prefer to get it done sooner rather than later, than have a week's gap, because I
Okay.
have some more travel coming up for work.
All right.
6 is fine.
Yeah.
So then I'll post meeting, and that will be, let's just tear through some of these budgets, throw out our thoughts, what we think we can do. Well, I don't know, based on money, we'll have to just see if we're gonna be at a position. We'll go through all the budgets, any questions that we have, or we have to go back to them, we'll figure that out. And then we'll just kind of see if we have any other questions on the budgets. And then see what we have for money.
And you want that at 7?
Yeah, we'll do the 26th at 7. All right, and then we'll figure out where we are from that, because it looks like we'll probably have a lot of work to do in the month of April. And then my last thing that I have is I would like to propose that we create a letter on the local meal tax to get it implemented, and write the letter to the Board of Selectmen to get it implemented for East Bridgewater. At this point, all the surrounding towns, and I don't know how many in Massachusetts, but I believe there's well over 100 that are implementing this meal tax, and I know everyone's gonna say, well, it's just another tax. The fact is that as you know, in life, in everything now, everybody is nickel and diming everybody. It's just the way it is, it's the way it's gonna be. So I just feel like we are leaving money on the table that the town could be collecting. I get we don't have a lot of businesses or, restaurants, things like that. However, it seems silly to me that, and I'll use my Cumberland Farm as an example, a fountain soda at Cumberland Farms here is $1.05. Every single surrounding town, I can't go to a different Cumbies, I don't even know where, and get it, and it's $1.06. So it's 1 penny, and I get it's not gonna be a lot of money, however, it's something. And, I understand about the whole tax thing, but at this point, why wouldn't we do what every other town is doing with that information and try to get more money? I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I get it may not be the popular choice.
Well, we've talked about, we have a limited number of
Right.
revenue streams.
Right.
We need any revenue sources that we can get.
What if it brought in $25,000? That could have solved, a problem. And the thing is, I don't believe it's heavy lifting I think everything is stored in your cash register or your,
Your POS
your,
system.
yeah,
It shouldn't be.
exactly.
If they're
So,
already tracking for like the
Regular
state,
ta-
then I
state
wouldn't
tax.
think that it would be an issue. I don't know
Right.
for sure, but I don't think it's gonna change anyone's decision. Is anyone gonna say, I'm not gonna get my pizza in East Bridgewater now?
well,
Like,
exactly.
It's not, I don't see that
It's
as
not
a
gonna
factor.
stop anybody from going to the Dunkin' Donuts
It's not,
drive-through
like
at all.
everywhere,
I don't-
everywhere I go, there's always a local meal tax, so everything is 7%.
I don't even know what I pay, because I hold my phone up and they scan it.
Right.
I know, I
It's a
do it
mystery.
Cumbies now too. So,
One of the questions I was gonna have for you is, what are we going to do as a town in regards to the limited amount of revenue that we're generating? And we clearly have an issue with, all the departments have come in and presented, or most of the departments at this point have come in and presented, who have really valid points to make in regards to the services they provide for the town.
Right.
And it's gonna get to a point where the town, unfortunately, is going to have to look at what are we going to do, because what we're doing is not sustainable, as, you know, the chief presented
Right.
today.
And this has been an issue since I've been on the board, and, you know, at the first year, it ended up working itself out. But then it's now really hasn't worked itself out. And there's only so much money, and this year happens to be, I would say, probably from a money standpoint, one of the most challenging because of all these real needs that departments are bringing. And if you look at them, I feel that each of the department heads is making a good case for themselves because they know what they need from a real needs standpoint. I believe they do. However, that being said, probably not gonna meet all of those real needs this year. Just, I don't think it's realistic, this year. I just don't think it's possible for us to do that with the numbers that are out there so far.
Well, and it's not sustainable, right?
No.
Because where is it going to
No,
come
it
to
definitely
next
isn't
year?
sustainable.
Any number this year becomes that number plus 2% in future years.
And again,
Exactly.
we are looking at these contracts and the personal
Right.
bylaws, and everybody's just constantly on this track
Right.
of up more, up more, up more.
And I think Tim Arman did something last year, actually, I don't even know it's him, could have been Chris Kelly, had done something, and that this town grows at a rate of like 2.7 in expenses.
Right.
Having the union contracts be anything but a 2% is irresponsible. But the problem is, there's so many different things in place that we don't always have a say. And as an advisory board, and that's really all we are, is an advisory board, and we can tell people, you're not on a path to be able to sustain this. But then where does it go? You're still negotiating the same that you did 2 years ago, the same that you did 2 years before that. So how do you get it to change?
I think something, if I'm understanding some of the pieces correctly, something important to keep in mind is as people keep shrinking these budgets and as they keep trying to work within these constraints, is that number that's going into free cash at the end of the year is gonna shrink every year
is.
as
It's already, yeah.
if there's not enough
Yeah.
room in their budgets and their spending, then that money's not coming in, so that's not, and it never has been a valid funding source, but
Right.
if
Well,
there's
free
not
cash
money
shouldn't
go-
be a
Right,
funding
no, it
source. You're
isn't,
right.
it is
Nope,
not,
I'm
so.
agreeing with you.
So if that number is shrinking too, then even it just becomes less of a possibility, so.
Right.
It's just something to
Because
keep
then
in
what
mind.
happens, once you get to the point where you have taken all the free cash, then what happens?
Right, and then
Right.
you're gonna try to start over and build it when people are going down to their bottom dollar, then
Right.
you're gonna grow it at, what, $12,000 a year or something like that, if, you
Right,
know, I mean, obviously, that's just a number I threw out, but.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and what worries me is that at town meetings, sometimes you have a reactionary vote instead of an I'll
Right.
probably get crucified for saying that. Rather than an educated
Right.
decision, process. And I think that, we are an advisory board, but I think that it's really important, for the Board of Selectmen and all of the town, that all of the town department heads who have come and presented have shown, the utmost respect to us and professionalism. And I
Right.
think there is the ability to talk about, maybe, the chief was saying something, the civil service, was implemented in the 1800s.
Right.
We have to also focus on, we are a very different town than we were 20 years ago. So how can we also work within our limits, but at the same time try and work as a town together?
right.
Just talking about, why aren't we all on the same Comcast system? That's a really healthy conversation to have. Where are there areas to save money and how can we all,
I
work
like
together.
that fact that you know, we had talked at the very beginning about the Comcast. I mean, that's just one piece that we uncovered listening to the, you know, the COA budget. And I think more collaboration needs to happen between departments. You can't work in silos. You have to, you know, cross your silos to achieve the most productivity, the most gains, you know, to be efficient.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think more needs to happen in that. But again, I, you know, hate to sound so dire, but we are pretty close to using all the free cash. I mean, last year at town meeting, you know, it was taken, you know, a play, and I guess I don't know where we are yet for free cash this year, but we'll have to see. But, you know,
It's not sustainable.
it is not sustainable. Nor is it a good, it's not a good practice. And that was made clear in an auditor's letter that the auditors had given to, is that it is not a good practice, so we'll have to,
We also have the bond letter available for
I will,
next week.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Yes, we need the bond letter, and there's one other thing. Any updates on capital? Have you guys
We're-
met recently?
There's actually, we've been meeting every week, so there's a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow's with the fire department. I think that may be the end
Okay.
of them. Last week we met with, the schools.
Yep.
And the DPW's previous, facilities with Brian Kiley.
Okay.
So, all good discussions so
Oh,
far,
good.
and,
The
you know, we
police
just, we
concerns
did
me.
have, you know, I had mentioned in a previous meeting that George met with us, maybe a month ago, and had stated that, you know, depending on how budget scenarios come in, depending on what those were, that, you know, he may recommend that we do no bonding for capital projects this year, so he
Yeah.
wanted to get a better feel, so we've asked, I believe Glenn's setting up something for him to come back and give us an update where he sees things.
Oh, good. That'll be good.
I was just saying, the police, the schedule of vehicles is concerning.
It's
to
very
think that
concerning.
They're only planning on replacing one a year, but to have that many with that high of miles
Yeah.
on it, know what would we do if all of a sudden 3 in 1 year were
Right.
beyond repair?
Yeah, because we had 2 before due to accidents.
Accidents, yeah.
And, you know, that was a struggle, and coming up with that
Yeah.
to pay, because you had no choice. So more to come, more to come. So I guess my to-dos are to follow up with the town administrator, see if he can come on the 18th. Bond letter, audit letter, numbers. And new grid on the library, what's the deal? Is it just the annual one where they increase it by 2?
Yeah,
But
but
it's
it's
wrong.
gotta be, it's gotta be evaluated,
But
so,
it's wrong.
yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah, so, okay. And then everyone's just gonna read the letter, the response.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else? Did you wanna talk about that more? Or so-
I just, you know, and I'm new to the committee, and I'm concerned, where are we gonna go? It seems like there's an issue, you know, that everyone is in need, and I understand what you're saying, that we might not be able to save, may not be able to provide their need budget, you know, we might have to meet somewhere in between, or we
Right.
might not even be able to do that. But it seems like there is an issue that needs to be addressed, because it's going to continue, you know, next year it's going to be the same thing but compounded, you know? So what is that discussion? You know, what is the possibility of new growth, you know, even just the meal tax for, local meal tax, but what is the potential? You know, have we exhausted everything? And just to, you know, if we're an advisory committee, we are limited, but what are the tools that we need so that we can make good decisions in regards to the budgets? So that way, if we know.
Right, to try to balance it.
Right, you know, if there's growth in 2 years because of being creative, then you can work around that. And just bring, a more collaborative effort and,
Right.
and work as a town, right? Because you have to consider the town as a whole and not just siloed.
Town as a whole, you're right. And, you know, just an example of that is in the police budget tonight, you know, I wasn't insinuating to cut a person, that is not at all, but you're dealing with people based on population. You know what I mean? So they need that many people, and, you know, with everything that's going on and all the training they're doing and all the different services to try to, you know, stem the flow of crime and what have you. So you have that, and then, you know, so where do you make your cuts? You know, if you're, because really, right, because the big savings is cutting people. That's your big savings, always in any company. So by doing that, but police, fire, you kind of can't, because you
Want
need
them to respond.
Well, right, your house is burning, you want the fire department to be there, and you don't want,
But the problem is, we want all of our services, right? We want our
well, we're a
roads.
selfish nation
Well,
in
we
general,
want,
but
we want,
yeah.
we want smooth roads to ride on.
Right.
We want people to respond when we
Yep.
need them, when we have an emergency.
Agreed.
We want people to care
Agreed.
for our children.
We want our cake and eat
everything.
it too,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right,
And that
but-
includes everything
Unfortunately,
from
yeah.
education to, like you
We-
said, services and
Yeah.
town looking, you know,
Yeah.
the way it is.
I think to your point though, Jen, it's a great topic and a great subject to begin a discussion around collaboratively between our group, the capital group, the Board of Selectmen, department heads.
Right.
What's being done for economic development growth in this town? What opportunities are there? What's the focus that's on it? Who's leading that charge? What's the strategic plan for this town?
Right.
And I think we do a good job, but I think there's room for improvement.
Agreed. I mean, isn't there always?
Always.
Right?
Right.
And
You
it
know?
always should be, right? You should
Right,
always
because how
strive for
else do you
that.
Right.
achieve, you know, higher? So, yes, and as a matter of fact, I don't know right now, and I believe that that would be a really good question for the Board of Selectmen. I don't know right now what economic development is in the town. I don't know if there's a subcommittee. I believe there used to be at some point, but I don't believe there is one right now. But,
Well, thank you for listening, you know,
yeah,
because it seems like the.
well, it's important, you know,
It's a great topic
but,
and discussion.
yeah.
Can't solve that problem today?
No. All right. Well, on that note, does anyone have any other open topics? No?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.